right. Ladies and gentlemen, joined today by Serafina. So on TikTok, you're Serafina Simone, I believe. Is that correct? Yeah. I started following her rather recently. I mean, within the last, I feel 6 months, like maybe even shorter. And her content is incredible. It's right up my alley. And for a lot of people, I know it'll be the same. And I'm just like very. We were just talking before the show about the best parts about being a content creator, besides the boost to our narcissistic. That's the best part, numbers go. Yeah, all right, I'm amazing. But the second best part is getting to see other people and the connection that we have with them, and talking about stuff that only we know about. That you can't really talk about your daily lives, and the creation of content centered around religion is even more specific one, because most people don't do that. And so like I relate to so much of what she says, and I couldn't wait to get her on the show. So thank you for joining, Serafina. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here.
Fantastic. So I always start these out by just getting a little introduction for the guest. So if you could you tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and what your primary influences and people you looked up to in your early days.
Yeah. So I'm Serafina Simone. I'm 24. I'm from Texas. I've kind of been in like the central Texas, like northeast kind of part a little bit. That's where I've mainly grown up. I started on TikTok, I want to say about 3 years ago. And my main topic that I talk about on my page is mostly deconstructing Christianity, just speaking about, religion, the Bible itself, and kind of like breaking it apart. I have a series on my page called The Bible Doesn't Make Any Sense. And it's my favorite series. I have so much fun making it. If I'm not mistaken, we've got like 58 episodes at this point, and I started it back in September. So I've been a busy bee for real. And so I absolutely adore that. I talk a little bit about abusive parents because I grew up with one myself, and that's kind of videos that I make as well. And so I kind of stay within those two topics. And yeah, I have a lot of fun doing all of my TikToks. I have an amazing community. I could not have possibly imagined that it would have gotten to this. And so I'm just insanely happy to be where I'm at. And I'm hoping that I get to continue to grow if this whole TikTok ban doesn't kick in. So
I think that's going to be fine. Like my personal opinion, I think I don't know. I have a lot of reasons for that, but I think it's I'm not. Then again, it'd be hilarious if I'm wrong, but I think and also if I am wrong and TikTok does end up getting banned, I would hope that the silver lining from it would be that all social media gets banned. This experiment has failed. Like this is
it's like what they're looking at here. They're like, oh, they're selling your data, and it's like, what app doesn't at this point? Like you would have to cancel literally everything. I'm like, you just want to get rid of TikTok, and you want a reason to do so. It's not a good reason. You're not fooling us.
I think it's more they want to own TikTok. I think they they want an American company.
All of the media that we see on TikTok itself, and try to like figure out like you can't see this, you can't see that, because when they're in control of it, they can. It doesn't matter what the outside world is doing. We might not even have access to it at that point. Like they could do that. They could do something crazy.
I absolutely agree. So one of my topics I talk about a lot too is Christian fundamentalism and my deconstruction from it. So I want that. What was your introduction to this brand of Christianity, and what denomination were you in?
Goodness. So I was basically born in the church. It wasn't even like I was introduced to it. It was always a part of my life. I can't remember a time when we weren't in church. And so we were Pentecostals. We were a Church of God in Christ. And so a real strict environment. Couldn't wear pants on a Tuesday at Bible study. Couldn't wear the color red. Women weren't allowed in the pulpit. It was an insane environment, looking from the outside in. But it was really just always a part of my life. It was never, and the thing was is that I didn't know any atheists. I did not have any atheists in my life, or really anyone who wasn't Christian or at least like believed in God. I remember I had a Jewish friend. She was the first friend that I ever had that was outside of Christianity. that was it. That was the closest that I ever got, because in any other situation, like to us, it was like those other people just like didn't exist. And so it was just Christians all around, church all around, Bible study. My mom married a pastor at one point, and so my stepdad was the pastor of our church for a while. So that was an interesting experience with that, seeing like the background of it all, like how the church operates behind the scenes, the people that that are sitting in the church don't get to see. And it was interesting being able to see that at such a young age, and seeing a pastor like in his natural habitat when he's at home, and like how he's so different from when he's out preaching and all of that. Like the past, like our pastor had a drinking problem. No one at the church knew that, but we found out when my mom married him. So it was like there's always stuff happening behind the scenes that people know nothing about, and it's just an insane environment growing up in it. And so it's been very, very like lightening. Like it's a weight has been lifted off of me since I deconstructed, because there was so much pressure. It was insane. And so
yeah, that I can imagine. Well, I know actually from experience. I wanted to mention, so you said that you were part of Church of God in Christ. I'd actually never heard of them. I was not familiar with them until, do you know Dara Star Tucker? Do you follow her on TikTok at all?
I do not.
Okay. Well, I interviewed her a couple of weeks back, and she said the same thing, that she was part of Church of God because she went to Oral Roberts University, and she was talking about how she was Pentecostal, Church of God in Christ, and how Oral Roberts was kind of split off of Church of God in Christ and another denomination, and which is why Oral Roberts wasn't quite as racist as most fundamental Christianity, because they had a relation with Church of God in Christ. So I didn't know anything about that. So that's so strange. It's weird to me to think of because when I think of evangelical like fundamentalism, I think white people. Like that's what I think. So like this. Amazingly, I hadn't heard of this organization until very recently. It seems like a weird sect for Black people to be in, but
it's so strange because honestly, if I'm not mistaken, I thought COGIC was like when you're talking about like a Black church, some people think like Southern Baptist. When you're talking about a Black church, to me, that's COGIC, and so it's like. It's not.
I didn't know what you meant by Church of God in Christ. Like, wait, what is COGIC?
Yeah, right. It's so strange, but it's a pretty. I went to a lot of like COGIC churches throughout my life. It was all over the place, and so I'm actually surprised that you hadn't heard about it. I thought they were like super popular, but
they might.
You're right though. When I hear like evangelical Christians, I definitely think of like white people. I'm thinking first thing that pops in my head is like Lakewood Church, which I attended for some time when I was like 14, 15 when we were living in Houston, and it was a complete 180. When you're in a Black church in that environment, and then you go over and you're sitting in like I guess they count themselves as non-denominational or whatever, but when you're sitting there and you're just like, this is no one's screaming, like no one's jumping around, no one caught the Holy Ghost, not one person ran through the aisles. I was completely shocked. I want to say I was like 14, and just being in there and seeing him, that was the first time that I truly saw a pastor perform. Because for me, even like growing up with like my stepdad in the pulpit and all of that, he had like a certain switch.
Yeah.
But with Joel Osteen, it just seemed so rehearsed. It seemed so like performative. Like this is something that we're performing for people rather than I'm speaking to the people about God or whatever. And so it's an insane difference between two. And when we were in the Black churches, it was very, very rare that we would see a white person walk in there. As a matter of fact, we probably would be staring at them if they came in, because it was such a rare occurrence. Because it was like we just stayed separated, and I didn't realize like the amount of like the segregation between it. I didn't realize it until I like left, and I was like, that's nuts. Yeah, we just kind of stay separate with that.
Yeah, Malcolm X famously said that the most segregated time in the United States is high noon on Sunday. It's true, because like Black churches and white churches still remain separate to this very day. And I wrote this down where you're talking just now. You mentioned the performative aspect of preaching in general. I hate that. I've always hated that. Like preacher speak irritates me to no end. It always has. And even so, when you have someone up there and there's like, and the Lord said you got to rise up. I'm like, okay, you don't talk like that to your wife or to your buddies. You're just doing that because you're on stage. And look, I get it. Like everything, when you're on stage in front of people, it's like, it's definitionally a performance. I understand that. There's a performative aspect to all of this. Oh, I suppose my mic's not plugged. I probably sound like shit. Holy shit. All right, folks. Not much better now. But there's a performative aspect to all of this. And I try to keep, whenever I do like public presentations or, social media posts or anything online, anything where I'm speaking to an audience, I try to keep it as conversational as possible. Like, yes, it is a performance, but this is about 95% of the way I would speak to you if you were here in person. And I think there's just something tacitly inauthentic about, changing the way you speak for the crowd to inspire an emotional response, which isn't totally fair because I'm doing that too, but I'm just doing it in a less ostentatious way. Yeah. And but it has its place. It does. Like, for example, Martin Luther King did preacher speak. He did it all the time. It was incredibly effective. Not for me. That's not something that it doesn't, that's the thing. It doesn't work on me. That's just it. Like I hear it and I'm like, okay, you're faking this. I don't like that. And that kind of bugs me. And I had a few questions with something you said. You mentioned you can't wear the color red. That's a thing. Yeah. Like, what was up with that?
Oh God, red was the color of the devil. If somebody walked into the church wearing red, they would damn near be asked to leave. Like, it was ridiculous. I remember this one time we were sitting in church and one of the deacons, I don't know why he did this, but he came in and let me tell you, he looked fucking amazing. He looked great. He had on a full red piece suit, like it was a full thing, red suit with the red pants, and he had these red, like it looked like alligator skin red shoes. Like he looked fresh. I was like, okay. And everybody, I hear all the adults and everybody, and they're like, look at him coming in here looking like the devil himself. And I'm like, all he doing is wearing red.
Wow.
It was nice. It was crazy. They are oh my God. And the ones that are the most like holier than thou, the ones that are the most like, I'm gonna pray for you, the ones that are laying hands on folks are the same ones that are talking like, behind their hands, trying to talk about somebody, saying, look at him coming in looking like the devil himself and all that red, all of that. Those are the main ones that are laying hands on folks.
That's incredible. That I've never heard that one before. Yeah. That is and I've heard some weird shit, but but is it just the color red, or is it just an excessive amount of red? Like, what if you have like red earrings or something? Like, what?
I feel like you could get away with like if you just wore like red jewelry, or I guess if you wore if one of the pastors was like wearing a black suit and he had like a red tie or like the red thing. If you like accessorized with red, they wouldn't say anything. But if you came in like all red out, like they lose their minds. And I'm keeping in mind the fact that the people that were in my church were mostly not exactly elderly, but getting there. Like they most of them were older people, and so just judgmental for no reason.
Yeah.
What's the deacon doing? He's just chilling. Y'all are making him feel bad for wearing red. He looks good.
A splash of red in small doses they can deal with, but anything more,
they can't deal with the whole thing. It's crazy.
I will say though, that's interesting because I remember so I went to a white church. My church was like all white pretty much, and I remember my pastor said, I understand that. But he pointed out whenever the Bible talks about sin, they always say it's red. He always says that, like, though your sins be as scarlet, they should be white as snow. I was like, that's a pretty good point. That was pretty interesting, which it doesn't make sense. For you, it doesn't make any sense. Because, like, what takes away sin? The blood, and blood is also red. It'd just be redder, but I don't know. But
see, I feel like a lot of things that they say, they don't think through all the way. They kind of just are like, oh yeah, that sounded good, and then they just kind of put it out there. And they're like, yeah, I killed that. It's like, you didn't think this all the way through. I don't think you did, because go ahead. In other cases, I was just going to say, in other cases, the blood or red, all of that is supposedly supposed to be a good thing. Like, we're taking communion. We're drinking this, like, you're picking and choosing when it's okay.
Yeah. It's situation dependent, whether you like the color red. Because that's really important. God that crafted galaxies and holds atoms together, really cares about the color of your clothes. Like that is first and foremost on his mind. It's like
it's insane. And what you're wearing too was a huge thing. Like I said, we couldn't wear, like, if we ever stepped in the church as women, if we stepped in the church with pants on ever in the entire time that we were in the church, it was a no-go. That wasn't something that we were ever allowed to do. And sometimes we would have Bible study like right after we like came home from school sometimes. And so we would literally be coming from school to go home to change into a skirt because what we're wearing is not good enough for the Bible study that like 12 people are in, but you know, God cares so much about me having pants on while we're studying the word. And so we would have to go home and change and rush to try to get the Bible study on time because we had to go and change. And that wasn't something that the boys had to do. And that was like a whole other thing going on in the church. They treat the girls completely differently.
Yeah. Oh God. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention that you said that you didn't know any atheists, and that's a good point because, and a lot of people, honestly, that religious or not, don't know atheists. People don't broadcast it a lot, especially women. Like I remember whenever I left my faith years and years ago, I was dating and talking about marriage with someone, and she was, not she was not an atheist and everything. When I had to come she didn't know I was deconverting, but when we got really serious, because when we started dating, I wasn't. I said, okay, I can't lie to her about this for the next 50 years.
Right.
I think it's my duty to tell her, and so didn't you guys know the rules, being unequally yoked with non-believers, so it didn't work out and everything, but you just don't meet a lot of, and so I remember it was difficult. A lot of people don't admit that they're atheists. And if you look at the stats, it'll say that, it was years since I looked at this, but, the atheist population, people who say I am an atheist was like 6% of the population or something.
Yeah.
And then
I believe it.
Yeah. And then when you look at the sex breakdown, it was like of that 6%, like 80% were men and like 20% were women. Mm-hmm. And my theory on this is that I don't think women can afford to admit that they're atheists because you're like, I was like, what is wrong with, because people will judge you.
It's so awful because it's like, and like I said, they don't treat the women the same as they do the men, because when a woman says that she's atheist, she's immediately seen as like damn near a prostitute. Like she's completely lost all of her morals. She's out here doing this, that, and the third. All of this, and it's like it's never been that deep, and they criticize us way more. That's why in most cases I won't say anything. That's not, I'm like, I won't bring it up in a conversation because, for one, I live in Texas. There's like 8 of us here, maybe.
Yeah.
So I'm here and I'm like, nah, I'm good. I remember when I was working a job last year, and it was an online job. It was fully remote because I work from home, and so that job fully remote, and we were going through training and all of that, and the woman who was training us was a real hardcore Christian, and for some reason felt the need to make that known, like in our, like within our training, like while we were training and such. And she was like completely against Halloween and was like just super just, she was safe to be Christian. She was totally safe to express her beliefs and express how she was feeling. She was safe to do that because, they're the majority. They are the ones that are safe expressing their beliefs, because in most cases, the people around them are going to agree, or at the very least, agree. And so I was sitting there, and one of my friends that I made from that job, me and her are like texting on the side, and both of us, we're both atheists, texting on the side, and we're kind of just like, can you believe that she's doing this today? It's like she's preaching today. And it was a whole thing. And I always look at it that's why whenever Christians say that they're specifically like in the United States, I'm like, please get real. I'm gonna really need you to get real right now. You are the majority for the people. Luckily it's going down, but you're still the majority.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of you here. You are not being persecuted. There's never like that. Just, you are safe to express your beliefs. You're safe to say, I believe in God. I believe in this. I believe in that. Laws are being made because of your religion. And yet you feel like you're the one that's being like picked on and all of that. And it's like, please get real, because there's people out here who legitimately can't speak up about their own beliefs. Like, even if I believed in another religion, it would be basically the same thing. But the difference is, which is really interesting, that Christians do this, and I know that they do this because I used to do this. If someone believed in, like, when I was a Christian, if someone believed in a religion, that was better than an atheist.
Yes.
It's like you're still going to hell, but at least you believe in something. And it was such a judgmental thing, but it was like, to them, they're like, at least you believe in some sort of God. And so atheists are just demonized, and it's really funny.
It is. Sorry, sir. I remember when I was a kid, I was reading a Calvin and Hobbes comic strip, and Calvin went outside. He wanted a snow day really bad. So he went outside and he prayed to God, asking for snow. And he's like, please, God, give snow tonight so it doesn't, I don't got to go to school in the morning. And he prayed and prayed and prayed, and he looked around. There was no snow. And he yelled out, the last panel of the strip was, do you want me to become an atheist? Was the last thing. And so, but I was like 6 years old, or maybe it was like 8 or 10. And I asked my dad, hey, Dad, what does atheist mean? And my dad said, that means a crazy person. I said, okay.
Whoa.
I said, okay. And so for years, I thought the word atheist meant crazy person. I think I was in high school before I figured out, like, oh, that's not what it means at all. And now my dad's great. My dad's a great guy. Like, he's still religious these days, but he's nowhere near what we were back then or whatever. But yeah, the word atheist has such a negative connotation to it that a lot of people just kind of stay away from it. And also people have a false idea of what, I mean, I'm not teaching you anything here, what atheist means, but they think atheist means, I am saying that I know with absolute certainty that no God of any type exists. Like a person who can't exist. Like, yeah, I would need to be a god myself to make a statement like that. And, they get it wrong. And you mentioned Happy Easter, by the way. We haven't we have not once recognized the miraculous event of the resurrection of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, roughly 2,000 years ago. I mean, hey, credit where credit's due. We got to tell them what's up. And
the whole weekend, it's crazy.
I know.
Actually, somebody left a comment on one of my videos about that today, and they were like, he didn't even stay dead, he just gave up a weekend. And I was like, technically, he died at like noon on Friday and was up before the sun on Sunday. He stayed on a Friday night and a Saturday. That was it. I said that like in high school. It's like, this is not 3 days, no matter how you cut it. Like, there's no way. Yeah, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, but it was not 72 hours. Wait, why do we keep saying 3 days? It absolutely was not. Right. You see what I mean? Whenever I say that they say things because they think it sounds good, but they don't actually think it through. They're like, yeah, and he was dead for 3 days and he rose. And it's like, first of all, that wasn't 3 days. If you actually look and think about like the times and what happened and all of that, the Bible itself tells you like when the sun was at its highest, that's whenever he gave up his spirit and all that. And it's like, that's noon on Friday and then Saturday. And then before the sun came up on Sunday, he's gone. And it's like, what did he give up?
Yeah, roughly a day and a half. Roughly a day and a half. So if you want to tell me Jesus was dead for 3 calendar days, okay, all right, we can go with that. But it was not 3 actual days, like 3 business days, maybe. 3 business days. But that's another thing about the resurrection, since it's the blessed day, is in the Bible. So the story of the resurrection, even if you want to ignore like the ridiculous, I love that. When you challenge people on the evidence about the resurrection existing, have you ever heard the book The Case for Christ? I don't know. Have you heard of this? It's old.
I feel like I have. I feel like people have left comments about it and been like, I need you, like, you should read this book. You should check out this book. I've never actually got around to it, but what's it about?
Oh my God. So The Case for Christ, I read it while I was a Christian. And so it's a book about this guy named Lee Strobel is the guy who wrote it. And he was a reporter for the Chicago Tribune or something like that. And he writes about his experience, and he's a reporter, and he wants to do this investigative report onto Christianity and the origin of the religion. So he goes and travels around the country talking to different Bible scholars. And he says he was an atheist and he didn't believe it. And so he was just going around, just asking questions. And I read this book, and it was the most disappointing read of my entire life, because he's saying, well, I converted to Christianity at the end of this journey because everything they told me just made so much sense. And he would ask questions like, well, so you're saying that the tomb was empty? Yes, it was. He's like, oh my God, I didn't know that. And it's like, okay, but I don't believe this for a fucking second. Like the entire book is just like 9 chapters of confirmation bias. I don't even believe the guy was an atheist, because as a Christian,
that's what I was about to say. I was like, it sounds like just a Christian who said atheist and then was like converted. Now you can too. Like,
right. Yes, that's exactly what it is. It is as a believer, I read this and said, this is dog shit. Like, this is absolutely terrible, because it used a lot of the arguments that I've heard over the years that would just make me, they would say stuff like, well, the 500 witnesses. It's like, who the hell
who are these witnesses? Who are they? I need names. I need dates of birth and deaths. That's what I need. Who are these?
Literally anything. From these witnesses, you can't give me one witness of this. You can't give me one. And the
problem with that too is the fact that the witnesses that were there weren't the ones who wrote it. No one who was there wrote it.
Yeah, it's at best it's secondhand information from 500 witnesses. That's what you're giving me. You're telling me to buy that. And how many times you heard the empty tomb, man? The empty tomb.
They're like, but he rose. But he rose, and it's like, okay, like,
it's like,
what else?
Disregarding the fact that you don't know if this empty tomb is real or not. Like, you have no idea. You're just asserting that it is. And second, let's say there was an empty tomb. You still got quite a bit of work ahead of you to prove that this was a miraculous resurrection of a man that had been dead for a day and a half. Like, you've really got a lot of work here. And they just confidently state this shit, and people buy it. I was like,
it's so strange. And I would tell you, like, as like when you grow up in it, I feel like only half of them fully believe it. The other half of them only like halfway believe it, but the doubts that they do have, they are pushing to the side. And I know that because I did it. There were so many times where people would say something that would like pop up, and I would be like, oh, well, this and this, or we're not supposed to know. It's not for us to know. We're not supposed to question God. We're not supposed to do this. We're not supposed to do that. And so it's like some of them fully believe it, like 100% fully believe it, 10 toes down. That's their belief. But there are some people out there who legitimately are just kind of going with it because they're like, well, I don't get it, but what else do I have? I'm with this. And it's really sad because that's how I lived my life for like most of the time that I was a Christian.
In my experience, that's most of them.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is the vast majority of them. Because look, one of the biggest disappointments that I've had, people continue to underwhelm me in my life. It's just I should stop having expectations so high. But I was really annoyed how few Christians actually gave a shit about what was in the Bible. Like they don't know. They don't know. And you ask these questions and they say, well, listen, because I do get the pushing the doubts aside. I understand it completely, because once you start, it's uncomfortable to question this shit. And then you know that, okay, if this falls apart, what do I have? Because now I'm stuck in a terrifying universe with no one looking out for me or my family. And I could get hit by a truck tomorrow. Like, that's scary. You don't want to deal with that.
In the beginning, it's absolutely terrifying. I remember when I first deconstructed, it took, I want to say, even now, I still have like a tiny bit of like a fear of death, but I was petrified of death when I first deconstructed, because it wasn't like what Christians don't understand about deconstruction is most people aren't trying to deconstruct when it happens. And so it's like, I've heard so many stories of people being like, I was trying to strengthen my relationship with God. I was reading the Bible to try to get closer to God. I was one of those people. And it's when you're going through and you're searching, it is the most gut-wrenching, like horrible feeling, because it's like everything was a lie. Nothing was real. Everything that I've ever known, everything that I was ever taught, all of it. And then when you look back and you like when your family is religious, it's even harder, because you see your family still following that religion that you just left. And it's kind of just like, you are still so in this bubble, and I'm sitting on the outside of it, and I can see what's happening, and it's terrifying to me, which is one of the reasons why that I had to distance myself from my family, because religious. And when it's someone like me, especially with the content that I make, because whether my family knows it or not, I know they've seen my stuff. Do I block them? Yes. Do they still see my stuff? Absolutely. They make burner accounts or whatever they can do, I swear. But it's so difficult when you deconstruct and it's a lonely period and people don't understand that. You feel angry. And so when we deconstruct it, people be like, oh, you just wanted to sin. No. Far from that. I wanted to believe so bad. I wanted to have it so bad. And so it's just, it's gut wrenching. It's horrible. And so it's not something that people do lightly. It's not something that people just one day decide, oh, I don't believe in God anymore. Forget that. That's, at least maybe some people do that.
I can't imagine. Well, you know what? I can imagine that for someone who didn't have like a deep, like a satisfying faith and relationship with God. Like someone who just is nominally a Christian, I can see that for them. Sorry. But for folks like us so I always say that the time I deconstructed was the worst time of my life. It was, man, very unprofessional. I'm like coughing up there, but it was the worst time of my life because I told you, like, not only did I have to end that relationship, or end it. I mean, I would have said, but she couldn't do it. I don't blame her for that.
They're so big on that equally yoked thing. It's insane.
And which is another thing that's weird to tell people. They're like, she broke up with you because you didn't have look, you don't get it, man.
Yeah, no, it's such a huge thing for them. It's insane. I had it in my head. I was like, I'm gonna have a Christian husband and we're gonna live a life of God together and all of this. And so yeah, no, they will not pair up with anyone if they don't follow their same faith. Sometimes even if they're like not the same denomination. Like,
yeah. If it's the wrong denomination, then you might as well. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like, well, we don't believe in the same stuff, even though we read the same Bible. I'm like, I don't understand it, but continue.
Yeah. And so I always said that the best way she's the only person I told, by the way, at the time. I didn't tell anybody else for that same reason. Well, I was never afraid of my folks disowning me or, being angry with me. They weren't that type of people. I just didn't want my folks going to bed every night terrified that their oldest son was going to spend eternity in hell. Like that, I didn't want to put them through that. And so I didn't tell them. So it was like 6 years later that I ended up telling them. And only because my hand was forced, because I don't know if you went through this, but I kind of like my die was cast, like my type was set on the type of people I was attracted to. And they kind of looked like conservative Christians because that's all I knew. And so, once again, not easy to find an atheist woman out there. And so I kept dating like religious women and everything. And it was always the same. They would always start off with, oh yeah, TJ, we're cool with it, until we got serious. And then they started thinking about this. It's like, I'm going to marry this guy and we're going to have kids and I'm going to go to church and he's not. It fucked them all up.
Yeah.
This kept happening. And my parents were like, what's going on here? Like, these women
keep losing all of these people. What is happening?
Yeah. And so it kind of forced my hand and I had to tell them. And when I did, it went as well as it could have possibly gone. And I wasn't worried about it going poorly. I was very fortunate in this aspect because a lot of people did not have that luxury and their parents, did not react to it well. But I remember telling them, and my dad said, I was deployed at the time, oddly enough. I was overseas because that's when my girlfriend broke up with me. And I was in the Army. Did not know
that.
Yeah. And so I was talking to my folks and my dad said, well, I knew something was up. I didn't know exactly what, just based on stuff that you've been posting and everything, but I didn't know what it was. And then he said something I'll never forget that was just so funny. And he says, look, I still love you. Like I always will. You'll always be my son. And as far I wouldn't care. I don't care that you're an atheist. They said, I wouldn't care if you were a Muslim. I'm like, Dad, Muslims believe in God. Like they're closer to you than I am. They're like, that would be
I honestly feel like that's the only other religion they really know. They're kind of just like, well, Muslims, that's so crazy. That's such a different religion from us. And it's like, you're both Abrahamic. Y'all are on this. Y'all are like, you're basically cousins. Like, come on.
Right? It's hardly a different religion at all.
Yeah.
Hardly a different religion. Yeah. And one thing so after that, I started going ham on this deconstruction shit. It was the guns of Navarone. I was Superfly TNT with this shit. I was just, because like you said, I had built up 6 years of not just frustration and depression, but actual anger, because I went to a Bible college and I talked to my professors and clergymen and stuff, and I studied this and I asked all the questions that every Christian has asked, and there's no good answers for it. And I remember asking one of them about people who don't hear about the gospel, because here's something that always got me. So you have Jesus in given the Great Commission, which, by the way, is not in the original text, which I find very funny. Like that at the end of the book of Mark, and I was taught this in high school at a Christian school, because it's marked in all the Bibles. Like every Bible you read these days will have like an asterisk next to the last part of the book of Mark, where Jesus is talking about the snakes and everything, holding snakes and everything. But I was like, okay, so why does Jesus tell everyone, this is your great commission? You need to go into all the world and baptize them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Why did he neglect to mention, hey, by the way, there are 2 whole continents that you guys know nothing about, with millions of people there? They would love to hear this. It's almost like he didn't know they were there. Like that's my guess.
That's the thing. And see, that's always like an argument that I always have, because it's like, and the thing is that what I had to learn is the idea of like God or Jesus like knowing all didn't pop up until way later, like after everything was already written. I had to figure that out later, because in the beginning, when we're raised as Christians, they teach us the way that Christianity works now. They don't really go into the history of it. They don't really go into like anything else. And so when they when they told us about that, they were like, okay, so he's all knowing, he'll always be all knowing, and that's how it's always been. But what I had to learn was that it wasn't always the case. And so when some of those books were being written and God says something like, where are you, what did you do, where's your brother, it's because he genuinely like didn't know when they were writing it. They didn't actually know. And so I honestly feel like didn't know. He didn't know at all. He had no clue. He thought they were the only ones, and that was it.
Yeah. God's a much more interesting character that way, and I want to touch on that, because I love this topic about the history of God and how God has evolved over time. And one thing we used to joke in Bible college that we don't like to. So it was a Baptist college, that we don't like to look too far into Christian history, because you go back far enough and it's all Catholicism. Like that, you can't get around it. You cannot get around it. They tried to, there was always a remnant where. I point these people out, because like it seems to be all Catholic once you go beyond like 1500. So yeah.
And that's why they don't teach it. That's the reason why they don't. I'm like, and I've talked about that too. I can't remember what video it was, but I talked about that, and I was like, I really, really feel like the reason why they don't touch on the fact that there is a history is because when they talk about a history has a beginning. And so there had to have been a time when Christianity was not, and they don't want people to start thinking about that. They want to stay in this bubble of it's always been here. And it's like, no, your religion is one of the newer ones, actually. So
it's brand fucking new.
Yeah, I'm like, not even your Jesus was following your religion. Like,
it's like the narcissism and the arrogance. It's funny they call us arrogant, because they display just breathtaking arrogance. First off, that, don't mind me, I'm just here on a mission from God. Yeah, don't mind me, I got a simple me like that. But also the way that my church and my community, or just me, the way I practice Christianity, would be indistinguishable from the way Jesus and the apostles are. Are you kidding me? Like, you really believe that? I want to go real quick before I forget about deconstruction and how difficult it is, and why it's so annoying when people say stuff like, well, you just want to sin, or God is real, you're just not. I was like, that is such a ridiculous thing to say, that we know God's real, but we know he's real and we're just dead set on pissing him off. Why would we do that? Like, if we knew that this all-knowing, all-powerful deity had a list of rules for us, why would I go out of my way to shit talk him and his book and his followers? And I was like,
exactly, it's
the last thing I would do.
They honestly feel that they're like, you don't know anything about Christianity, you don't know anything about God, you need to get closer to him, you're leaving because you're getting away from him, Satan's leading you astray, or whatever they can come up with at the time. And it's like, it has nothing to do with any of that, and it has everything to do with my personal belief that none of this shit is real.
This that perfectly ties into what we were talking about with God and I know everything, because I remember back in the Facebook days, I was having this argument, and this guy I went to college. So I was talking about how you guys' perception of God as the Lord does not date back to the beginning of Judaism. That's not how this worked. And I brought up examples like that where God was like incredibly interrogative back in these days. Got a shitload of questions. The guy couldn't wait to find out more information. It's like, why is he asking dumbass humans these questions? And you, after a while, it's not to teach a lesson. Like he genuinely wants to know.
Does he not know? Like,
yeah. And so when you really see it at first when, and I'm sure then again maybe not, maybe a lot of people just aren't inquisitive. Because I remember thinking, I'm sure you did, where you're reading through the Old Testament and you have the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He conquers Pharaoh. He does the 10 plagues, and the Hebrews leave Egypt. Like, all right, cool story. And then within a matter of days, they're leaving the Lord for the rain god. And you're like, hold on, why would you do that? Like, I assume they're part of the same reasonably intelligent mammalian species that I am. Why would you give up the God of everything for a God of one thing? And I was talking about how if you read the history of this and look into, Near Eastern religions, you'll find out that you have, Abraham had El Elyon as his Elohim, which is like his God. Like he was saying that was his God. And that's the one he chose over Baal and Asherah, and all these other gods and everything. It makes a lot more sense that way. Like, everything else in the Bible makes a lot more sense when you realize that there was a pantheon of gods. Yahweh was one of them. And
he wasn't the only one. And people, that's the problem with the whole monotheistic thing. Because of the fact that they have gotten it to the point to where they're like, there's one God and that is it. And it's just the one.
Yeah.
But there's also Jesus, who's technically God, but not, but also his son, but also kind of not, because they're the same. They're on the same level of power, but Father and Son. And then there's a Holy Spirit that sneaks its way in. And so monotheistic, one God, but in three forms, but they're all the same and on the same level, but they're not. It's so confusing. It's like they can't get their mythology together.
They can't. The Trinity one. Why do they even bother? Why even bother with the Trinity thing? Because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't. Like in any, and they try to come up with these clever, like, well, water has three forms. Like, okay, all right. Yes, water has three forms, but water cannot be liquid water and ice at the same time. It can't. That's not how this shit works. Like, it's one or the other, and it's just. And then my favorite answer to that is, well, listen, if I could understand it, then he wouldn't be God. It's like, all right, then you could say that about any God then. That's not evidence for your God at all if you can't understand it. So it doesn't help you.
That's just evidence that he made you unintelligent. Like, that's not. I'm like, what do you want? I'm like, that's the thing. That's what they be like, well, God is too big and his understanding is not our understanding. We're not going to be able to get him because he's on this level of power and all of this. And it's like, then why are we here? What is this for?
I bring this up a lot when people say this because, all right, I am willing to concede that if there were a being like this, like a God that could create a universe, yeah, I would not possibly be able to comprehend this being. I admit that. However, neither can you, which means you don't know this being's will. You don't know what this being has for our life. You don't know it any better than I do. So, trying to say that you absolutely know what God has, or like this book was definitely written by him. It could have been written by a different one. You don't know.
See, those are the points that I bring up, and people get so mad at me for saying that. And I'm like, listen, first of all, God didn't write this book at all. It was a bunch of people who were apparently like inspired by him or under the spirit of him or whatever. And it's like, this book was written by man, and they're saying that they were inspired by God. How do you know, for one, that the first one who wrote, like, let's say whoever wrote the book of Genesis and whoever wrote the book of like John, how do we know that they're both listening to the same God? How do we know that? No one knows that. You don't know anything. As a matter of fact, there's stories in the Bible where people can't even tell that it's God or the God that they want or whatever. They can't tell that it's God. It ends up being somebody else. Like there's a story where apparently, I say apparently because this is what Christian apologists try to say, not what the Bible says, but apparently Satan made himself sound like God and tricked David into doing something, and David got a punishment for doing it. And because he didn't have discernment to know that it was Satan and not God. And I'm like, with that in mind, can we look back at the entire book itself and think about how many gods there are, which the other God apparently acknowledges the fact that there are others there, and the fact that they might sound the same, they might not sound the same. You don't know who you're listening to, who you're getting your stuff from. And so it's so strange when they're like, I'm absolutely certain that this is Yahweh, this is my God, and this is the only God, and he's talking to me and telling me this and this. And it's really funny whenever you ask them, if God told you that and told them over there something else, who's right? Then they don't know what they're talking about.
That was I will get to this question. Some of your first cracks in your armor. That was a big one for me when I was in church, and we would have business meetings like on the one Wednesday a month or something like that. So you stay after church, and pastor would get up and he'd say, all right, so we have an idea to allocate, X amount of dollars to renovate the auditorium, or, add a wing to this part of the church, or whatever the fuck, they're talking about. And so he says, okay, so here's the proposition. Here's the proposition. Here's how much it's going to cost. Here's how much time it'll take. And so, look over this form or whatever and go home, pray about it. And next business meeting, we'll vote on it. So this would happen. And the church members would gather the next business meeting and we'd vote. And the votes would be like 60-40. And I'm like, wait a minute. I was like, hold on. Like, we're all praying to the Holy Spirit here.
Yeah.
Why is the vote disparity so large? So you're telling me that either 40% of this church is wrong, is not right with God, and God's not talking, or 60% of this church is not right with God. Either way, how can we be sure that, because it should be near unanimous every single time if we're all talking to the Holy Spirit? Why is he fucking up this message delivery? It's almost like he's not talking to any of us. Like, that is kind of what it seems like.
That's the funny thing about it, is they will all claim that they're talking to the same God, and it's like, y'all are getting a bunch of different answers here. So is he just being indecisive, or what is happening here? Is somebody getting the wrong message from something else? Is there are we losing signal? What's happening? What's going on?
That's actually, I titled the name of this this interview, God is not the author of confusion, because that is a hilarious verse. Hilarious. Because
when they say that,
it is nothing but confusion. Like, since day fucking one, it's been nothing but confusion.
We started off not knowing what was happening.
It's so funny reading about the formation of the early church after the death of Jesus, because it was chaos. Like, no one knew anything, and there were people who were arguing mainly over the person of Christ. Like, all right, was he fully God, or was he fully man? Was he fully God and fully man? Was he half God and half man, which is different from being fully God? I mean, it's like they had no clue like what this whole religion was, and the biggest one ended up winning out. And it's like, okay, it sounds like God's the author of confusion. I gotta say, that's what it looks like to me. So that's my favorite Bible verse, because it's just so hilarious.
And it's so funny when people say that. They're like, if you're confused, you're not close enough to God, or you need to pray for discernment or something crazy like that. And it's like, no, I feel like I'm reading these words perfectly fine. And I really feel like if you look back at the text itself, the text that's been translated thousands of times, put into different whatevers, and has been written by a bunch of different people. So that text just can't be wrong. It's me that's not understanding it right. That's my fault, not the text that's been edited 60 million times. No one's gonna talk about that. It's just me. I'm the problem.
Yeah. And well, what's insulting about that is that you guys aren't putting in the work. No. We actually are. If you're a Christian and you've actually listen, the thing also too is like, I can count on one hand the times I've spoken to a Christian about this stuff that I was impressed by what they knew. It almost never happens. Like they just kind of go along. Oh, let's go back. I was saying back. I was talking about on the Facebook days about how this whole thing started from like Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, not real people, but if they were, they would have been polytheists. And then eventually they would have been monolatarists. Like they believed in many gods, but they chose one from themselves. They didn't worship many gods. And I had a guy comment on that I went to college with. He goes, what are your sources for this? I said, bro, this is your fucking religion. Like, do your God the respect of knowing where the fuck this shit came from. Don't be coming to me asking to do your homework for you. I just laid it out. And that's the insulting part, because like I'm spoon feeding you the shit that you should know. You should be burning the calories and learning how this stuff works, and you don't bother to, and then you get mad at me for doing it for you.
Yeah, I will never understand that, as they will constantly be like source, and it's like, what do you mean source? You find this is yours. I'm the one that's reading it here. I'm the one that has it. And the thing is that with my videos, I made a point to make it so that if I'm reading off of something, we're going to look at the screen together. So both of us can see what I'm reading, because otherwise people will be leaving comments like, where'd you get this from? Where does this come from? I always show my because I'm like, listen, this is where I got this from. This is where I got this from. This is what I'm trying to figure out. And I will put it out there like that and still get comments of people being like, where'd you see this? What did you use? Where'd you get this from? This is inaccurate. I'm like, this is the Bible. This is your book. What do you mean it's inaccurate?
But they love that one. And it's going to trigger you. I don't know. It's like, well, I'm sure that was taken out of context. Like, I remember one time, we were talking about the end of the book of Mark. And so I mentioned that, all right, well, the person I was talking to, I went to school with. And once again, she was actually smart. Like, she's actually a smart person. And I was telling her that, well, you know, if you're a biblical literalist, as she was, I said, you know, the snake handlers, you know, those crazy folks that we all made fun of and everything, they actually have a point. Like, if you actually read the Bible, Jesus very clearly says that one of the ways that you can prove that you were one of my children is that you can ingest poison or get bitten by venomous snakes and you won't die. And so that's why they handle snakes. And then she said, well, that only applied to, you know, the apostles. And I was like, no, it didn't. I said, Jesus said this to the 70. And you don't know the names of any of the 70, and they don't have any more apostolic authority than you or I. And then she says, well, I'm sure, you know, there's more context. I said, okay, you didn't know this verse existed 10 seconds ago. And all of a sudden you're telling me, you know, it's out of context. And she kind of like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense at all.
I'm telling you, they make up their own rules. They make it as they go. And they kind of just, when you come to them with a very serious thing and you're like, this right here does not line up with this right here, and they will come up with any excuse they can pull out of their asses to try to make it make sense. And it's just like, you, for one, are confusing yourself, and you're making this sound even worse than it does, because now it doesn't make, now I have even more questions. Without, like, anytime that I ever like asked a pastor or asked, you know, some of my Christian friends about something that I didn't understand when I was trying to get closer to God, the answers they would give me would confuse me more. I'm like, well, now I had 10 questions when I walked in here, and now I have 35. What, like, you've made me feel like I don't understand more now.
That's why I felt so angry when I finally left. And funny, it's like for all of us, leaving wasn't voluntary. We just kind of realized, okay, I'm an atheist. Like that, that you realize that it's not a choice you make. Yeah. And then like, oh, for the thing I was talking about where Jesus doesn't mention North and South America or Australia. They didn't know that was there either. No. And like all those people. And so I said, okay, so what about people who don't hear about the gospel? And different Christians have different answers for this question. But for my denomination, they thought, yeah, they're shit out of luck. They go to hell too. Yeah. And I said, okay, well, what about people, you know, that doesn't seem fair. And of course, I knew the answer I was going to get. The answer I was going to get was, well, if you read the book of Romans, Paul says that look at the trees argument that, you know, you can see the world around you is definitely a God. So they're without excuse. And I said, okay, I got that. But I can look around and say, okay, this is a lot of order here. I think a God created this. There's no chance in hell that I'd say not only is there a God, but he is a triune deity who spoke reality into existence, who sent his son to die on a cross in ancient Palestine. Like, there's no way you could figure that out.
They would not get those types of and see, that's the problem whenever you ask them what gets someone into heaven, because they don't have an answer for that either. No. And they will try to give you all types of answers. And someone in that sort of situation who is just, well, look at the trees, and they look at the trees and they're like, oh, a God created this. Even if they figured out all of the details to it, they still probably wouldn't have enough enough to even get it into heaven, because there's a lot that you would have to know. And that's the thing. They have so many different answers for what comes with that. They're like, either you have to believe in Jesus Christ, believe that he died for you, believe in God, go to church, be a good person, whatever reason they come up with. Someone who has no knowledge of that God specifically, because they say it has to be their God. Somebody can look at the trees and be like, oh, there has to be a God, and they end up worshiping another one. They're still going to hell because you saw the trees and saw there was a God, but didn't know which one it was. And they don't think this stuff through.
No, it doesn't make. And then the answer that I got was, well, if they sincerely want to know the one true God, he'll send someone. It's like, okay, so you're telling me that for a millennium and a half, there wasn't one person in North and South America who thought, hey, I'm going to call out to the true God. Like, you're telling me that is the way. I'm sorry that you don't believe that. And so that's when I was upset about, because like the smart people who study this, they definitely had the same questions and they just swept them to the side and just ignored them. And I refuse to believe they can't figure that out. They just said, well, it must be true, and kind of went with that. And that's what really upset me.
That's the thing. Is they don't realize that they say that we as atheists, like, choosing to be atheist, whatever that means, choosing to be atheist is taking the easy way out. And it's like, no, choosing that, like, believing that your specific God created the entire world and everyone else's beliefs are wrong, that's taking the easy way out. That's whenever I'm like, you're taking the easy way out because you believe that your God is the answer to literally everything. That's taking the easy way out. You don't have to think about literally anything else. The answer to everything is your God. I remember when we were kids and I was in like school, and they would talk about writing Jesus as the answer to like every answer on the test. And it's like, you have that luxury as a Christian, that you could do something like that and it would just be seen as like a joke or whatever, because you truly think everything comes from him. Everything will always come from him. You're allowed to think that way. Everyone else's God is wrong to you, though. That's the part where I'm like, come on now. You can't be like, my God's the only true God, and everyone else is saying my God is the only true God. We can't all be right.
Yeah, it takes no thought at all. In fact, that's actually one of the things I miss the most from being
turning your brain off.
I had the answers. I had all the answers, and it was great. And you mentioned actually, I'll just ask you first. What was like the first major crack in your theism? Like why people leave is never a one answer thing. It's always a confluence of events and discoveries and education. But do you remember some of your earliest ones?
Oh yeah, the very, very first time that I had a question that kind of was just like, wait a minute, was when I was I want to say I was like 8 or 9, and we were in church and we were like leaving church for the day. And as we're walking to the car, I asked my mom, I was like, so where does the money from the tithes and offerings go? And she was like, oh, well, it goes to God. And then me, 8 or 9, wasn't trying to be smart at all. I was genuinely asking this question. And I asked her, I said, what does God need physical money for?
Mm-hmm.
She was like, you're being smart, you're being evil, you're being blasphemous, don't question God. Lectured me the whole way home. And all I could think about while I was sitting there while she was yelling at me was, she didn't answer my question. And so from then on, I was like, how many other questions could I ask that she wouldn't know the answer to? But I knew then to stop asking them out loud. The reprimand that I got, I think I got a whooping that night too, if I'm not mistaken. So like the reprimand that I got from just asking that question of what does God need physical money for, I don't know if she just didn't know the answer or if she was just
that's not even a hard one. That's not even
I'm like, come on, you could have easily just been like, oh, they use it for the building or whatever.
Yeah.
Could have just done that. She just immediately got pissed, and I was like, I struck a nerve. I struck a nerve, and I was like 8 or 9, and I had no clue, and that stayed in the back of my head. But the thing is at the time I was under the impression, for one, absolutely terrified of my mother, for one, so I wasn't saying nothing. But for two, I was terrified of God, and I thought that he could hear my thoughts. And so the time that I had a question like that pop up in my head that I felt like I wanted to ask somebody, I always pushed it to the side, because I was like, God can hear my thoughts, and if he hears me questioning him, he's gonna strike me dead or something crazy, which is an insane mindset to have as a child, that this deity that you're being taught about loves you, but if you even think about questioning him, he'll like strike you dead. It was horrible. I lived in fear for so many years. because I thought that the questions that I had, valid questions that I had, were blasphemous and I was going to go to hell for thinking. And so that was definitely the first crack, but it was not the only one.
Name a few more. These are always funny. Yeah.
I told this story. I told the story on my TikTok before, and I still think it's funny, even though I told it a couple of years ago. So I was going to a white church at this point. It's actually a church that's in my town now. They changed the name and changed the pastor, but I was going there, and I was going there for youth group during the weeks. And so we were going to youth group, and we would do praise and worship and all of that. And as we're like jumping around and feeling the music and all of that, the pastor's son is leading us in worship. And he gets in the mic and he's like, "Everybody jump!" And none of us jumped. And so I didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal. And this dude stopped the song. He cut the drums, cut the music, he cut everything. And then he gets on the mic in front of a bunch of kids. There wasn't any adults in the room aside from the ones that were on the stage. A bunch of kids whose parents left them at church to go to youth group. And he's like, "What the crap? When I say jump, you jump. We're going to start this song over. And when I say jump, y'all are all going to jump." And so we're just standing there. Like I said, I was like 11 or 12. Just petrified. We're like, okay. And then he starts the song over, gets to the part he was at, and he's like, "Everybody jump!" And then we all started jumping because we were like, okay, scared of this dude.
Yeah.
And when I got home, I didn't tell my mom about this, but when I got home, I was like, he yelled at us. Why is he in the church? Why is he like, is he seen? It's like, is that something that God would have wanted for him to yell at us, to tell us to jump during his song? And that was a crack where I was like, okay, I feel like these people are not, because before then I basically idolized the people who were on stage, pastors, people in the music groups, all of that, idolized them. Like they were like directly influenced by God. God himself was moving through them and all of that. And when that happened, I was like, well, if God was moving through him, that was kind of harsh. Like, why? What would like? And so that made me start to see the people on stage as more human, and started seeing them as maybe they're not working with God, but if they're not, why are they here?
Mm-hmm.
That's when I really, but again, that mindset, I had to push it aside because I was like, God can hear my thoughts. He's going to strike me dead for thinking this, that, and the third. And so that was another crack. And honestly, just reading the Bible.
That'll do it. That'll do it.
Reading it will completely turn you upside down, especially when you're like, they tell you, they're like, you need to read the Bible for yourself and read it with a pure heart and read it while you're trying to find God. I did all of that. Because I tried it. I tried literally all of it. I had the purest heart. I was in tears on my knees with my Bible in my hand, or my Bible in my lap, looking down and like reading through it and talking to God and praying and being like, please just show me something. I feel so lost. Crickets. So I had to go and find my own answers. And the answer I found was atheist.
Yeah, that's why it's just so devastatingly insulting. Like we mentioned earlier, when people say that you're just, if you could just open your heart, if you could just really study, it's like, go fuck yourself.
Yeah,
I put more work into this.
No idea.
Yeah, than you've ever done. I guarantee. And by the way, that every conversation I have with Christians pretty much verifies that they haven't actually done the work on this. Yeah. And I think I saw a video you did rather recently where you were talking about asking God for a sign. Did you? Okay, you did. Okay, yeah. Because I remember that too. I was in 7th or 8th grade, and I had read a story about what was it? Was it Gideon? It was Gideon. And God had called Gideon to lead the army into a battle. And Gideon's like, okay, well, I'm going to make sure this is God saying this or whatever. So he took like a fleece and he put it outside on the grass. And I forget the order, but this is just the story where he tells God, okay, so there's going to be a dew that comes out tomorrow morning. If I come out in the morning and there's dew on the grass, but the fleece is dry, I'll know it's you. So he gets up, sure enough, fleece is dry, dew is on the grass. And then he says, all right, I'm gonna try this one more time, but tomorrow morning, I want the dew to be on the fleece and the grass to be dry. And he gets up, dew is on the fleece, grass is dry. I was like, hey, that's a reasonable thing to do if you think a supernatural being is talking to you, to see if they can actually, a pretty small mission for Almighty God to do something like that. So I remember I had this tie. I wore a tie to school because I was a fucking nerd. No, actually, dad would make our school made us wear collared shirts, but dad always made us wear ties, me and my brother. And we didn't have to, but dad made us from the school. But
my mom did the same thing. She made us wear uniform skirts and we didn't have to.
But it's weird. I don't know if it's because dad did this or because I do think this. Like, I don't wear like collared dress shirts without a tie. I think it looks weird. Like it's made to hold a tie. I don't know, but it's
hey, you're not wrong. I mean, it's sometimes just like polos is what I'm like. I don't think, but in any other situation, I get you. Like,
yeah. But yeah, polos. That'd be funny. Wear a polo shirt. That would be pretty funny. A Hawaiian shirt with a tie. It's got a collar. I need a tie. But I took one of my ties and I put it on the couch that night, and I said, "Okay, God, if you know." I think I even said like, "If you're real," like ballsy for old TJ because I did believe God was real, and I said, "Okay, if you're real and you're talking to me, like tomorrow morning, I want this tie to be on the other couch or the love seat or something." Because I remember thinking this very carefully. I was like, okay, the tie being gone wouldn't work because someone could just pick up the tie and take it or something. So, but no one would pick it up and put it on a different couch. No one would do that. And so she went downstairs, tied in the same spot. I tried this test many, many times and it never worked. Now, that didn't make me leave my faith, but I do remember. And then people was like, well, you know, the Bible says not to tempt God or test. Like people do this in the Bible all the time. What do you mean?
Literally. It's like, when did this rule pop up? Because people are doing it all throughout the Bible. Like, when did it pop up that you're
under no chastisement? God never gets pissed off and says, "Hey, why are you doing that?"
Yeah. I can never understand it because it's like I will read through so many different stories of the Bible, and there's so many different people that will go through and they'll test God, they'll bargain with God, they'll like yell at him.
Lots. Like casting lots is essentially testing God. Like, hey, yeah.
I'm like, that's crazy. And it's like nowadays they're like, that's blasphemy, that's horrible, don't do that. And it's like all of your Bible heroes were doing it. I don't understand when this became a bad thing. Like they were doing it.
It's kind of like when you ask them why you don't see miracles today like you used to. And they say, well, you know, miracles ceased after the Bible was completed. And it's like, where does the Bible say that? Like, show me the verse that says after the New Testament is completed, miracles will stop. You will not find it because the writers of the New Testament didn't know they were writing the New Testament. Like they had no clue that someone's going to come around years later and compile this into a book. So I know that verse isn't there. You just made that up.
That's what I mean when I say they make their own rules. That's what they do. They just make it up as they go.
And Christians in history, throughout history, weren't operating under that assumption. Like they thought that people were performing miracles all the time. Like the Catholic Church has a whole gallery of saints that did miracles thousands of years after the New Testament was completed. So something's not adding up here.
I'm like, you're just making up your own rules at this point. You're just trying to make it sound better with your own little thing. And it's like, wouldn't that be looked at as blasphemous more than anything else? You're adding shit to the story. Like that should be seen as blasphemous more than me like saying something bad about God. Like, come on. You're trying to add stuff to the Bible. If it's such a perfect book, you wouldn't have to add any rules to it.
Yeah. I like the fact that it's a book in the first place. I think I find it to be one of the more bulletproof arguments against the existence of the Christian God as people present it, because so we have once again triune deity spoke reality into existence, crafted galaxies, holds the nuclei of atoms together. Like everything you see and you know, it comes from this deity. And he has a problem in front of him. The universe he created is fucked up, which is not, doesn't speak too well of him. But
like you created this dude. This
and in one of the quintillions of planets in this universe that you created, there's sin. So you got to solve this problem. And it's like, okay, so my solution to this problem is to take my son, who's also me. There's a third guy, but I'm sure that will be confusing later on. And I'm going to send my son to Earth to be tortured and executed and in a human sacrifice. And that's going to solve this problem of sin. It's like, okay, No, I'm sorry.
No.
The God that created all this wouldn't. That sounds like something an Iron Age warlord would think of. I get that. You tell me that happened. Okay, fine. But and then he's like, okay, so the atonement is complete, but I need to get the word out to all these people. So here's what I'll do. I'm gonna convey this message in the form of a book. Well, actually, 66 books written by dozens of authors over hundreds of years, and I'm gonna do it in 3 languages, and I'm gonna give it to a planet with single-digit literacy rates. And when you think about people who actually spoke the languages the Bible are written in, it's even lower than what you're thinking about for a world.
And they don't. This is what I mean when I say they don't think stuff through. They don't think through any of that stuff. They are honestly thinking that it's like, you do not understand how many people were involved in this. There is like hundreds, if not thousands, of people that were involved in the creation of this book. And you're telling me that those people, all of them, all were under the influence of the same God. Really?
And got everything right.
And got every
decision
right. Got everything right, heard everything right, and wrote it down right. Remembered everything right. And it's like, come on now. I'm like, there's got to be a point where you look at it and you're like, this doesn't add up. And that's the thing is they was like the Christians, they'll be like, well, you just didn't want to believe, you just wanted to sin, whatever. And like, no, I just kind of opened my eyes up a bit. It didn't really take a lot. It
doesn't. It's like you said earlier, God can be like the concept of God can be destroyed by a child and they do it all the time. They do it. A child can stump you on the absurdity of this whole thing quite quick in 4 or 5 questions easily. And so one thing I like to say is that atheists or people who don't believe in like the Christian God, whatever, actually have a higher opinion of God than Christian people do. Like we actually do, because I would expect more from this God. Like, for example, we talk about like the Bible and everything. That, by the way, they granted the Bible to a population where only the rich and powerful could read, which guarantees that the people who control this important information are the ones who are going to exploit the poor. As like, I got to tell you, if I was in charge of a plan and someone came like, no, that is absurd. Like this, I would expect more from the dumbest human being, the dumbest mortal I've ever met. And you guys think this was God's plan. Like you think he put his stamp of approval on this. You don't think much of this guy. You really don't.
I'm like, even if you just look at how the world was created to begin with, like, and how it was destroyed the very first time. It's like, at some point, this God that you claim is so perfect made a mistake and made multiple mistakes. We're just talking about the book of Genesis.
Yeah.
Bunch of mistakes.
It's a comedy. It's basically a comedy.
Like, are you serious? Like, I remember when I first, like, because when you're a Christian and when you grow up in the church all the time, they will purvey like this certain image of this story. They'll tell you the story, but they won't give you specific details that would be found simply by reading it for yourself. And that's why a lot of Christians haven't read it, because they go to church and their pastor reads it for them. So that was my problem for so many years. And so for a long time, I had sat in church and I had heard the story of creation, but I had never read the story of creation. And once I read it, I was like, okay, so either this is 2 different creation stories, or this God messed up multiple times, or both, but the details are different. Everything is jumbled up and weird. And it's like, if you think this is God inspired, God don't know what he's doing.
No. It's so funny talking about how the stories are told to you.
Yeah.
I can't believe I meant to mention this in the beginning of it. It's actually what made me, I think, reach out and ask you for the interview, because you pointed out something I didn't know, and Noah's Ark.
Yeah.
Not one time does the Bible say Noah preached. I went back. I was like,
yes.
Fuck, I never caught that. I didn't
either. I was so upset when I first found it. I was like, are you joking? The amount of times that I was in church and they were like, and Noah warned them, and none of them listened because they wanted to sin, and so God killed them. And it's like, no, he didn't. Telling people wasn't part of the plan. It never was.
I would have bet.
he immediately was like, "These people that messed up, I'm about to plug them."
Gone. They're
He
gone.
didn't give them a chance.
It's one of, and this is like I felt like back in those days, because listen, I would have been positive the Bible said that Noah at least told one person, "Hey, come over to the ark." But I read that passage like 3 times. There is not the assertion, the implication, even the suggestion that Noah went out and talked to people. It is not there at all. I was like, holy shit! Like I'm subject to this shit where you just believe these legends that are told without studying the actual text. God, I can't believe I forgot that. That was so good. That was so good.
It's because, and that's how I know that like a lot of Christians don't read their Bible, because I didn't read mine when I was a Christian. I was just hearing the stories, and that's what it was. And I didn't start to actually read it for real until I was trying to get close to God, and then I ended up deconstructing. Before then, it was like specific passages that I was told to read, or that I was told to read, and there was like specific things that I was supposed to look at or whatever, but it was never like, go study it, really, really look and dig into it. Even when we did Bible study, it's like we weren't even studying. We were studying one passage. And the thing was, I talked to one of my friends about this, one of my mutuals on TikTok, because he's also in the midst of deconstructing. And he was like, it's so funny how they would just bring up the same 10 to 15 passages and just talk about those in church over and over again and not talk about anything else. And because the passages that I would bring up in like the Bible doesn't make any sense series, people would leave comments and they'd be like, they didn't talk about this in church. And I'm like, yeah, they're not going to talk about this in church. They want everything to sound all fluffy and nice and stuff. That's it. They're not going to talk about the nitty gritty and the stuff that makes God look bad.
Yeah. The Bible stories that are the most illustrative of the absurdity of this are the ones they don't tell. Those are the best. And the funny thing is, so I grew up in a church that did encourage us to do a lot of reading. And they, for the most part, I knew most of the complex or problematic stories. Like I did know most of them. There are a few. I didn't know the abortion one growing up. Like
that one was crazy. Numbers 5. That one. Was
yeah. I didn't know that one until
Numbers 5 or Numbers 11. One of the two.
Yeah, somewhere in Numbers. Yeah. In the book, no one reads. So like Chronicles and Numbers, fuck out of here. I'm not reading that shit. That boring. Yeah. I don't blame people for not knowing that, because who wants to read those books? They're terrifying, but boring. But like the one that I remember. This is another one that was another crack in the armor. The story of Jephthah. So
that's Judges 11. Oh my God.
All right. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the story, there's a soldier in Israel named Jephthah, and he's gonna go into battle, but he's not confident about his troops. Like, oh, this is gonna be pretty tough. These guys are gonna be kind of pretty difficult. So I'm gonna ask God to help me win. Which, okay, fine. And he asked God to help him win, but he says, hey, I'll sweeten the deal. If you allow me to win, when I get home, the first thing that walks out of my house, I will put a sacrifice. Weird thing to say, first of all.
Thing that walks out my house.
My house. Like, right? It's like,
you couldn't do anything else. You couldn't say, like, the first animal I see on my way back.
Right?
Yeah. Like that. The first thing what is walking out of your house but a person?
Right? Wait, did you were like, man, my house cat is always the first thing out of the house. Yeah. So of course, yeah. So God does, so he goes into battle and wins, and he comes back home all confident, and his daughter steps out of the house because she's excited that her dad came home from combat. Of course it's going to be a family member. And so he goes, oh no, I couldn't possibly have foreseen this. And so he tells his daughter, which what I love about the story, the girl is not even named. She doesn't even get a name in this story. Like,
she's just the daughter.
Jephthah's daughter. Like, not
she's like 12. I want to say
not an important
girl. And so like, it's crazy as fuck. That entire story is insane, because the thing that I did not understand was the part where he like sends her away for like 2 months.
So yes, so he comes out. She comes out. He breaks down crying. She's like, well. Pop, what's wrong? And he says, boy, do I have some bad news for you. Okay, so I was talking to God before this battle, and I told him a vow that I would sacrifice the first thing that comes out of my house, which happened to be you. And she says, okay, that is a real bummer. And he says, yeah, it's kind of tough, right? Awkward. And she says, well, okay, I understand you made the vow to God, but can you give me a weekend to hang out with my friends to mourn the fact that I'll never get married and I'll never have kids and I'm automatically excluded from being in the line of the Messiah? He says, sure. And this is how you know the story's bullshit. She came back. Like she came back.
I wouldn't have. I would get out of there. I would have been gone. I'm not coming back.
That's the one saving grace that I know the story didn't happen, because no one's coming back from that news.
No,
and so
I'm like, absolutely not. Even at her age, I'm like, there's no way in the world.
No fucking chance. And
I'm not coming back.
And then she comes back, and the verse says that he fulfilled his vow. So I bring this up to people. I said, okay, that is a human sacrifice to capital G God Almighty. Like, there's no other way to read it. And of course, I'm sure you've heard it, but they find ways to contort this. Is like, well, he didn't actually, he didn't actually
kill her. He just sent her away to go
to a convent
forever. Yeah, it's like, no, that's not what happened. And the sliver of like a source that they have for that is the verse that comes immediately after, when he says that he committed, or he did it. After that, it's a verse that talks about how some women had dedicated the spot that she was executed, that she was like killed at. And they had dedicated that, and they had like called it a special name, and that was the spot, and that was like a memorial for her. And they're like, no, that just means that she went to go and be with them. And it's like, are you not reading the book? Do you not have it open? Read the text. What does the text say?
Right. You're making it up to make it sound not quite as bad. But okay, let's go ahead and go with that theory. So you're telling me that he basically put her in prison for the rest of her life, and that's the best.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So defend that one for me. Like, tell me how that's good. Where a dad can just imprison his daughter for life. As like, I don't think you win this either way, even if we take the mild route.
No, and the thing is I feel like a lot of them just haven't read that story, and they'll just be like, oh well, it must have been this, because they'll come up with excuses for literally anything. Just like in Judges 19, when the prostitute gets chopped into 12 pieces. It's like the concubine, excuse me, because she was the second wife, gets chopped up into 12 pieces. Are you familiar? You're familiar?
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, perfect. Just double checking, but just that story has never, ever made sense to me. It's stories like that I'm like, why is this in the book?
I was right about to say that.
Yeah, I'm like,
I don't know why that story's there. Like, I don't.
Why don't you include that?
It's so. For those who don't know the story, there's a Levite who goes into town. These stories are so wild.
We love it. We're summarizing.
A Levite is a man of God. So there's 12 tribes in Israel. Actually, maybe 13. I think it's the 13th. Anyway, but in Israel, and he's a Levite. The Levites were the tribe for the priesthood. Like, that's the tribe that Moses and Aaron came from. So they're the priest. So these are the men of God. Like, when Jesus tells the story about the Good Samaritan, he talks about the Levite, because this guy's supposed to be a good man. So the priest is cream of the crop of what we have here. And he's got a concubine. He's got a second wife. And that's another thing with polygamy and stuff. It's like, the Bible never said anything about polygamy. Not once. Yeah. It never one time. It's like, you guys say biblical marriage is one man. Well, show me. Like, show me anywhere.
See, that's another thing. I'm like, y'all don't read the book itself. All of these like so-called Bible heroes had like 15 wives. I was sleeping with everyone.
I'll get back to the Levite one, but I remember in college, so the boys in college did this because like the girls didn't study Bible because they weren't supposed to, basically, and so
that might have been the reason why they told us that we weren't supposed to read it.
Yeah.
To account the fact that I'm a woman, that might have been what it was.
Almost certainly. I remember being very upset with the women in my Bible college because they didn't seem nearly as interested. And it took me a while to figure out, they're probably like, shoved away from, like, don't worry about that. Your husband will figure it out for you. Yeah. And so I remember talking about this because I spent like a couple of months on this monogamy thing, because the only verse that you can find that endorses monogamy at the expense of polygamy is when they're talking about bishops, and they say bishop must be the man of one wife. That's it. That's the only time you like. It never said for anybody else. No. And when you look at all the people like the patriarchs and the kings and stuff, hundreds of wives, and
so many wives, and they all live together. That's the crazy thing about it. I'm like, why are you all here? Like,
so that's what I brought up. I said that, okay, we were talking about the story of Jacob, and Jacob had 2 wives and a couple of concubines, and so and they were all vying for Jacob's attention because they wanted children, because that raises their status, and I get it, I would too in that case. And I said, okay, Jacob is a human being. He's a man just like the rest of us. You're telling me he wasn't having threesomes?
Right.
You really think that? You tell me that a man with like 4 women
Ain't
that
no
are
way,
hit?
no.
Of course he is. Like, there's no way.
I know he did. I
Of
know
course.
he did. And the thing that gets me is that the wives that he had were not only his cousins, but they were sisters. They're sisters.
They were
And
sisters.
the other 2 concubines are both of their cousins. I'm like, what is this? Why does everyone want this dude's dick? What is going on?
So Jacob, I'm running off track here. What was I talking about? Oh, Levite. Don't forget the Levite, TJ. Okay,
Yes, Levite.
I have Jacob written down. This interview is all over the place, but I love it.
It's
But
okay. It's fun.
it's fun. So Jacob was another early crack in the armor, because I was fascinated with the book of Genesis. That's where most of the cool stories are. Like, Genesis is nothing but like a murderer's row of fun stories the entire time.
There's so much killing, sacrifices, wars. Everybody's dying. It's crazy.
It's crazy. There's angels with there's angels with fire swords and shit. It's some awesome shit.
It's like, where does all this come from? It's insane. I had to realize that it was about. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, please.
I had to realize that a lot of Genesis was about like the start of nations, and so a lot of like the names that were mentioned were talking about like individual people, but they were talking about like the birth of nations. I had to figure that stuff out too whenever I was studying, because that's another thing they don't teach us in the Bible. But
so they taught us that. They taught us that because they taught us a story like with Lot and his daughters. Like, they made it very clear. It's like, oh, this is the start of the Moabites and other people. Yeah, I remember them teaching that.
They didn't teach us that stuff. It's crazy. It's crazy that they taught y'all, because that wasn't. I'm like, all of this was stuff that I had to figure out on my own, because now I'm really starting to see. I'm like, okay, my church, or the churches that I went to, or maybe just that just COGIC in general, is just really sexist. That might just be kind of just. Kind of just like, you don't need to read. Like,
that was all of them. I think that was all of them.
But you're right.
I will say that my church and the high school that the Christian high school I went to, they did put a big emphasis on reading the Bible and studying, and they did encourage us to ask questions. What they didn't like is when you didn't accept their answer. That's when they got upset. Like, they're like, whoa, hold on, this usually works. What's going on here? But I remember being a child, probably 10, 11 years old. And I remember learning that when Jacob's name was changed from Jacob to Israel, and they said, well, they changed it from Jacob to Israel because Jacob means trickster. And I was like, oh, that's a strange coincidence that Jacob is named trickster, and everything he's done, he's like the Loki of the book of Genesis. I said, yeah, was that like,
that's a great way to compare him. He literally is. That's insane, because he's going through, he's doing all of this stuff. He's getting literally everything he's ever wanted, and he's going around and he tricked his brother twice, tricked his dad. He was his mom's favorite. He was like a mama's boy.
Tricked his uncle.
I'm like, he's just going through. And the thing is when I covered that story, people were in the comments and they were like, does Jacob ever get like punished for this, or is he just going through? He's taking people's wives, taking their cattle, taking their land, taking their blessings. I'm like, and so I didn't read far enough to see, but I'm like, Jacob needs to get his ass.
I'm having a hard time thinking of a time Jacob got punished for this shit. Like, I guess the closest is that when he tricked Esau one too many times, Esau kind of like got really pissed and he got scared and he ran away from home.
Yeah. That's where he met his 2 wives.
Yeah, right. It's a trick is another family member.
Tricks another family member. I'm like, you just keep doing this stuff.
Oh, well, you know what? He did get tricked by his uncle, though. Laban did trick him into marrying the wrong daughter. So
that's right.
Maybe
he married the oldest one first, but he wanted the younger one, and so he ended up tricking her. And the thing is that it's like, was it that dark in there that y'all you couldn't see?
Were they the?
You can hear her voice. You didn't like. Do they? I don't understand how you got that mixed up. Like,
they were the exact same height and frame.
I'm like, listen. I think about my sister. I'm the oldest. Me and my sister don't really look all that much alike at all.
It's like, this story would work if they were identical twins. That's the only way the story would work, and you made it clear that they weren't. So sorry.
I'm like, you would have known, and I don't think it would have been easy to trick you unless you were just a straight up dumbass. But unless and then again, that
wedding may have been one hell of a party. Who knows how drunk they were?
Hey, some people say that burning bush. People were on that burning bush.
The burning bush. I always joke about this. I remember high school saying like, all right, it's weird that we call it the burning bush. We should call it the talking bush. Bushes burn all the time. Like, that's not a miracle. The talking bush, all right, that's what I'm into because it spoke.
I'm like a literal voice somehow like came off of it, and it's like that was an insane story for me to read, honestly. Like, Moses, I'm like, what do you mean Moses is talking to a bush? What do you?
Yeah. the fact that the bush was on. Say what?
I said, is this dude on something? Like,
yeah. The fact that the bush was on fire, least interesting part of that story. It's like my country mile. But I do remember being bothered that Jacob, and then I saw this theme a lot of times, that these people had names that reflected their character. It's like, okay, this is like what you would do in a story where you would give, and then I thought, okay, well, maybe Jacob wasn't actually his name and that it was recorded this way for that. That's the thought I had. It's kind of like, I don't know if you ever watched Pitch Perfect. You ever seen the movie? So Pitch Perfect is an interesting movie to me because the first time I saw it, I didn't watch it on my own volition. I watched it because I was talking to this girl this one time, and I went over
to do it.
Say what?
I said that's one way to do it.
I was over at her house and we were just bored, and she's like, "Oh, we should watch a movie," and I said, "All right, sure." And so she walks over and she picks up this like pink and purple DVD. And I was like, oh my God, I'm about to sit through 90 minutes of like some garbage chick flick. And it was Pitch Perfect. Breathtaking. I loved every fucking second of that movie. And I was like, I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. And Das Sound Machine was robbed. They were much better at the end. And but I remember one of the biggest laughs I ever had was either Pitch Perfect 1 or 2. I don't remember which one it was, but it's when Anna Kendrick's character is talking to this guy and she mentions that she's never seen Star Wars. Mm-hmm. And that he's like, oh yeah, he's like, you should check it out. It's a really good movie. And he's like, there's a really good twist in the second part. And she says, is Darth Vader Luke's dad? He's like, what? He's like, how did you know that? She says, well, Vader means father in German. And I just started laughing so fucking hard.
I forgot about that scene. Now I gotta go back and watch that movie because I feel like I haven't seen that scene.
Oh my God. It was a pop. I didn't know that. I didn't know Vader meant father in German, but like it was just so funny that the answer was right there in front of you the entire time.
I feel like that's just that is insane. How did I not know that? I was a choir kid. We watched that movie all the time. It was nothing but Pitch Perfect. How did I forget that?
It may have been Pitch Perfect 2. It was one of them. So it might have been Pitch Perfect 2.
It might have been the second one.
Yeah, but yeah, that was always funny to me. Back to the Levite, folks. For the Levite, start with the Levite.
So far off topic.
But he goes into town. These are just so cathartic for people like us. Like it's just like it's but he goes into town and he stays in a hotel. And I can't remember like the prostitute the concubine wasn't allowed in, or maybe she left for something. For some reason, she's outside. I don't remember why she was outside.
She got thrown outside because the dudes came and they were like, "Hey, we want to."
Oh, right, and like Lot, yeah.
Mm-hmm. They threw, and he threw her out for the night, and then he woke up the next morning, and she's just laying outside, and he's like, "Get up," and she's dead. It's not funny. It's just the way that he was like, "Get up, we got shit to do," and he doesn't care that she's just laying on the ground unresponsive. But yeah,
the callous nature too.
Right, correctly, it was because she got thrown out.
I forgot. Yeah, she got thrown out, and so she's raped to death all night, and then he slices her body into 12 pieces and mails the 12 pieces to the 12 tribes of Israel, and saying, "This will teach you a lesson how evil Israel is." It's like, what? What?
That was my question when I read. It was like this happened. The reason why this story was in there was to show like how evil the people were, and I'm like, that just means that God watched it happen and was just like, "Well, there you go. You can do that. You can use your free will today. I won't impinge on it today. Maybe tomorrow, but not right now."
And like 12 letters would have sufficed. You didn't need to send her horse. Yeah, what? Why
did you have to chop her body? I'm like, I never understand that. You could have just given her a regular burial. I thought for a while, because I couldn't find an answer for that, for why he had to chop her up. I was like, what was the reason of him dismembering a literal body. Why?
I'm
like, I couldn't find an answer. I don't know why that happened. I'm like, for what? Why would you? You know how hard it is to cut a body up? Like,
right. I just remember reading that story and I'm like, okay, so you're not the worst person in the story, but
you're kind of up there. Like,
this is like this doesn't make you look good either, my guy.
No, I'm like, come on, this is actually insane. Like, why? What about the girl's family? Like, nobody missed her. Nobody. What?
It is one of the most like inscrutable Bible stories there are, because you're right. Like many times I was like, why is this here? Why you could have ended the story with the dead concubine and the message would have gotten across just fine. People are evil and fucked up.
There, but like, I don't know. There's sometimes where I have to dig really deep into stuff because I'm like, this just sounds too crazy. And then when I find the answer, the supposed like Christian answer, it makes it sound crazier. And I'm like, okay, well, this is just insane. I don't know.
It doesn't help. Doesn't help. This goes back to what we were talking about. Where the God of the Old Testament was several different gods that they kind of like retconned into one. And when God shows up with two angels to talk to Abraham, and he's like, hey, your nephew is living in Sodom, and so I don't like Sodom. I'm going to get rid of him. That's what I'm going to do. And he says, well, and once again, Abraham is thinking, my nephew lives there, so I don't want it destroyed. So I'm going to bargain God down. As if God wouldn't already know that. I just
I'm like, I couldn't get that part at all. I was like, what do you mean he's arguing back and forth with God, trying to bargain with him, trying to get him to cut a deal with him? I'm like, is this not the all-powerful deity? Why is he cutting deals with folks? Not folks, puny humans. Why would he do that?
It makes no sense at all. And then he gets it down to a reasonable number. It's like, okay, I'm sure there are at least 10 good people in Sodom. So we'll go with that. God can read my mind through this whole thing. So why don't I just lead with this shit and say, hey, I'd rather you not kill my nephew. Like, why not just say that out loud? But
no, it was so pointless. And it was the way that they wrote it out in the Bible itself was so pointless. They were like, they literally went through it and they were like, well, what if there's 90? What if I find 90 people? Well, if it's 90, then this. Well, what if it's 80? Well, if it's 80, then that. And it just keeps going. I'm like, we're wasting paper. What is this?
We get the point. And so then God, because God can't be bothered to do his dirty work himself, he sends two angels.
You gotta send them to do it. And the thing is the angel's job, from what I read in there, none of the entire story just does not make sense at all. But the angel's job was supposed to go in there. At first, the angel's job was to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. It literally says that in the Bible. Like, the angels were like, God sent us here to destroy it. But then at the same time, I was like, do they know they're supposed to be searching for 10 righteous people? They didn't search for the people. They didn't find them. They didn't look for them anywhere. They got into the city. The group of men or whoever immediately wanted to rape them as soon as they got taken into the home with Lot. And from there, they were like, well, we're just going to destroy this entire thing because these dudes outside tried to rape us. They didn't search for the 10 innocent people. They didn't even bring up the 10 innocent people ever again in that story. And they just everybody. And I'm like, what happened to the bargain? What was the point to going through all of that?
What I really love about that story is it wasn't just a group of men that demanded them. It was every man in the city.
Everybody in the city gathered around Lot's house. I'm like, did they ring a bell and say, hey, we got new people here? How did everybody get around Lot's house and they all want to rape the angel? I'm like, what?
No one worked the night shift. No one was asleep. No one was traveling. Every man in the city showed up to Lot's house to rape two men. And
I'm like, what even? And even looking at that, the proportions. How would that work? Everyone in the city.
Well, it works one way. The person ends up dead when you're done.
I mean, yeah, but it's like you only got two people. By the time they end up dead, somebody's not going to get a turn. So
right? Yeah. You make those guys airtight the entire night. It's still like going to take quite some time.
This is what I mean when I say it's really funny whenever you go through and actually read it. Because when they tell you the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, they tell you a very vague version of the story. They don't go through the details of finding the 10 innocent people, because once you do that, you have to acknowledge the fact that they never looked for those 10 innocent people. And they don't bring up any of the other details. And the thing, this was the biggest part of that. I made a video about Sodom and Gomorrah. This was the biggest part of it. The idea of Lot's wife turning into a pillar of salt. For so many years, they taught us that she was turned into a pillar of salt as they were escaping Sodom and Gomorrah. And that's not what happened. She didn't get turned into a pillar of salt as they were escaping. They were already gone. They were gone. They had already, like, Lot had made like a deal or something with God, and he was like, see, more bargaining, and made a deal with God, and he was like, because God had told him originally to go to the mountains. He was like, you'll be safe there. I want to get you as far away as possible, because we're not only destroying Sodom and Gomorrah, but also the surrounding areas. And so he tells them to go to the mountains, and Lot's like, I don't want to go to the mountains. Can I go to this one city over here? And God's like, yeah, sure, why not? They get to the city, and then that's when the destruction starts happening. And so Lot's wife was looking at the destruction from the other city. And so my question has always been, how does that work? What does, like, and I'm like, who saw her? Because it wasn't when they were running, it was when they were already in the city. I'm like, how far away is this city? Because he said he was going to destroy the surrounding areas. So I'm like, she got turned into a pillar of salt for looking at the city from a distance? How does that add up? And so it was for so many years, I was just taught she was turned into a pillar of salt. She looked back, and that was it. And they don't go into like the actual details of it. But when I read it and I went through it, and out of it was like, yeah, they had made it to the city, and then that's when the destruction happened, because God was like, I can't do anything until you're gone. And so it was the entire thing. And so for me, I'm like, how did she see it? How did she look back and turn into a pillar of salt? Who saw her? And if someone else saw her, why didn't they turn into a pillar of salt? There's so many questions that like line up with it, because Lot and his daughters didn't go to the mountains until after the destruction had already happened, and they hit the city, and then they moved from the city to the mountains. But like, his wife had been turned into the pillar of salt after they got there. And I was like, for one, why? They were already gone. Like, if she was looking from a distance, I guess that's fine. But again, who saw her?
Well, there's two things I have to say about that one. The first is, I didn't know that they were in a different city, because that makes the next part not make sense. Because if they were in the city that wasn't destroyed and they moved to the mountains, why would his daughter say, well, the world has ended? It's like, hold on, you were just in another city.
I'm like, that's the thing that didn't make sense to me. The daughters were like, well, no other men here. Rape our dad. Like, there's nobody else here. And that's the thing that I was wondering too, because I was like, they went from Sodom and Gomorrah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, I didn't know that either until I said, that's the reason why I do The Bible Doesn't Make Sense.
Yeah, that's
the reason why I do it, is because I will go back and actually study and read through and like figure out the context, read the surrounding chapters and all of that to figure out what's going on here. But when you go back and read Genesis 19, when he's going through and destroying everything, he ends up, telling them, you can go to this one city that's far-ish away. It's far enough away that it won't get destroyed, but it's far away enough so that, you'll be away from everything. Because of, originally they wanted to go into the mountains, like I said. And so, they had already escaped to
wow, I know that.
Yeah, it's insane. They'd already escaped to the other city, and they were already there. And then that's when the destruction started to happen. And so this narrative that she was turned into a pillar of salt while they were escaping, that's not true. They were already in there. Yeah.
And the second thing is something that has, I don't know, it's bugged me forever. Why a pillar of salt? There's no exposition on the symbolism or the reason or nothing. It's like, it's what happens.
Well, I'm like, but why? Like, out of all things, and no one else, to my knowledge, gets turned into a pillar of salt in the Bible.
No.
I'm like, to my knowledge, no one else gets turned into a pillar of salt. So I'm like, what was special about Lot's wife? And the only answer that I could come up with was they were raining down sulfur, and so somehow, some way, salt. But that's like the only answer I can come up with, because I'm like, how else does that make sense? And plus, it says that God turned her into a pillar of salt. Why would he, like, out of all things that he could have chosen? He could have just struck her dead.
He could have struck her dead.
Yeah, he could have just struck her dead. He's done it to other people, apparently, in the Bible. And I'm like, why? Salt. And I feel, and actually, I think I might know a reason. So there is an actual there's an actual pillar of salt on the Dead Sea that is called Lot's wife.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like maybe people saw that and they kind of either made the story. I don't know how old the pillar of salt is. I don't know.
Yeah, I was about to say, how old is this pillar of salt? Yeah,
I don't even know. I'm like either they saw the pillar of salt and made the story, or they had the story and then the pillar of salt came afterwards or something. I don't know. But I'm like, that part I can't understand at all. I'm like, salt? Why?
One of the weirdest. Yeah, one of the weird, because it's just weird because usually they explain when something weird happens and they make no effort to explain what's
They
what.
didn't say
Yeah,
anything about it. They were just like, she got turned into a pillar of salt. Now she's dead, I guess. It's like, it's like if that's the case, what happened to her? Like, where did she go? What happened?
Yeah.
Because the actual pillar of salt that's off the Dead Sea, it's like really, really big. And I'm like, ain't no way in the world that's like actual. I don't think people believe that it's actually her. Some people might.
Yeah.
But like, I've never been able to understand it. And so I don't know. The only answer that I ever been able to find is that there's an actual pillar of salt called Lot's wife.
I've heard of that pillar. So I always assumed that it was just named after her. I never thought that maybe the story was built around it. I know, but
I don't know. I feel like anything's possible at this point because I don't know how old it is. But I think it's like a natural thing. So I don't know.
Yeah. The so God's inscrutable actions and speaking of like God doing atrocious things and destruction is I remember just it was hard. Like losing my faith, I always say, was the worst part of my life. It felt like I lost a limb. Like it was a horrible feeling, you know, and I lost my friend, I lost my creator, I lost my purpose for being alive. It was a terrible time. But man, the knowledge, like learning has been so great because I ask the same questions that every Christian at one time has at least asked. It's like, okay,
I'm like, you can't say that you haven't at least thought about it.
You definitely have. You definitely have.
Question of being like, well, wait, what if this, but this doesn't? I'm like, I know you've it's at least crossed your mind.
Oh yeah, like you're reading the book of Samuel, and God tells Saul, go into this town, kill the soldiers, kill the civilians, kill the men, the women, the children, the old people, kill the fucking animals, kill them all,
everybody.
And you definitely thought, wow, that seems like a bit much, you know, and then. You find out, well, you know, they don't, but, you know, we do. We find shit like this. That, one of the gods is Yahweh, and Yahweh is the war god. That's why he's obsessed with blood. Yeah. That makes sense. Like, that makes complete sense. Mm-hmm. It makes a hell of a lot more sense than the God of the universe really, really wants you to bring back 300 foreskins. Like, it's like, what?
I can't understand that story. I cannot understand that story at all. And the thing is didn't King Saul only told him to get 100?
He brought more.
All you need is 100. And David was like, okay, bet, double it. Like, I'm like, you and foreskins. Why? Out of all things, you could have just killed them. You could have taken heads. You could have done anything else. You could have taken a pinky toe. I don't know, but really, foreskin?
Heads would have been less work. It would have definitely been less work.
And I don't even have one. I'm hurting. Like,
so God. Do you know this story? There's a really funny, it's not funny, it's fucked up in a lot of ways. But so two sons of Jacob, it was Reuben and Levi. And Reuben and Levi, they were, you know, hanging out doing, nomad things. And they have a sister named Dinah, Dinah. Almost Dinah or Dinah. Yeah, okay.
She was the only daughter that he had because he had a son.
And so, for you guys that don't know, she was working in a different town for this prince, and the prince raped her. He had advances on her. She rebuffed him. She went back a couple times. He raped her. She comes back. She tells her brothers, and understandably, they're none too happy with this news. So they develop a plan. They develop a genius plan where they say, hey, we hear that you're pretty tight with our sister. He goes, oh man, she's amazing. I love her. It's like, okay, do you want to marry her? Because they can do that. Yeah, go ahead and marry my sister. And he's like, yeah, I'd love to. He says, all right, cool. Well, check this out. We practice Judaism. Judaism, what's that? Well, it's, our faith and everything. If you want to get married to our sister, you have to convert to our religion. He says, all right, no problem. He says, there's one catch. You need to get circumcised. And he's like, sure. It's like, Jesus, he really,
Yeah.
like, wow, that is
yeah.
And it's like, not only you, but since you're the prince here, every man in this town needs to be circumcised. He's like, all right, I'll put out the news. And so him and every man in that town gets circumcised on the same day. So they're all laid up for like a week and a half, and so Reuben and Levi just go in and slaughter everyone in the town. Like, the other guys had nothing to do with this. Like, the other dudes had no beef with them whatsoever, but collateral damage. And so, like, yeah. Why is God so upset about this shit? Like, why?
I will not understand the obsession of foreskins in the Old Testament. There's so much of it. It's actually insane. Like, there's another one where Noah's son gets involuntarily circumcised in front of his mother, in front of literally, God and everybody, because God was getting, for those who don't know, God was getting ready to kill, not Noah.
You know what? Moses. Yeah.
I don't know why I get those mixed up, but I heard a lot of people do. But Moses, God was getting ready to kill Moses at one point, and it was so random, and it comes out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere.
No one knows why he wanted to kill him, what the purpose was, or whatever. The only thing they have to go by is God was mad and was about to kill him, and then out of nowhere they just go and they circumcise the son, just like right in front of everybody, and then God's just like, okay, everything's good now, I'm fine, I'm not gonna kill you anymore. And it's like, that was the thing that kept you from killing him. Like, this is your favorites. This is how you do your favorites. This is what you do.
The only normal part of that story is batshit crazy, minute one to minute done, until the very end, when Zipporah, Moses' wife, says, "You are a bloody husband." Like, I was like, yeah, that's a normal human. Is like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Out of nowhere, you just cut off part of our son's dick. What is the deal? Like, all right, okay.
Just did it out of nowhere. I'm like, he had no time to prepare. He had no time to think about it. It was just immediate circumcision. And I'm like, for one, how did they know what to do? And for two, how did they know that would work? Like, what if you just circumcised him and then God's still gonna kill him? What happens then? You just
guess again, Moses.
See, and so I don't know. The only answer that I ever found was that it was the fact that he wasn't circumcised, and apparently God was mad enough about his son not being circumcised that he was about to kill not the son but Moses himself, which is another thing. There's so much collateral damage. You mentioned collateral damage. There is so many people who, oh my gosh, who get killed for no reason. They had no part of it. They weren't part of the trauma. They didn't know what was happening, and they died. And it's like, people are kind of just like, well, collateral damage. They just had to die, I guess. And it's like, no, they didn't. They could have been left out of that. Why didn't God? The thing is that in most cases, it's God punishing a specific person by killing other people.
Yeah, someone.
Why?
Yeah, a lot. It's terrorism. Like, that's what terrorists do. Yeah, that's what like the bad guys do in comic books. Is like, I can't get to you, Superman, but Lois Lane I can kill. And it's like, well,
kill everything you love. It's like, wait a minute, why can't we just? And actually, in there's a story where David actually asks God at some point. He's like, why are you killing them? I'm the one that did the thing. Punish me. Why are you doing this to them?
I was gonna bring that. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And so,
David's son. David's baby.
Literally, that whole story. Second Samuel 24 was like, it's one of my favorite Bible stories ever because it's insanely fucked up and no one can give me any sort of explanation about it at all. For those who don't know, 2 Samuel 24, one of my favorite stories ever in the Bible.
Real heartwarmer, this one.
Oh yes. It's all about so David is basically told by God to do a census, and so David goes and counts all of the fighting men, and then when he does it, he comes to the conclusion that he has committed a sin. And it's not that God tells him he committed a sin. Nobody tells him anything. It literally goes from David did the census to I've sinned and now I've got to be punished. And God kind of was just like, okay, pick your punishment. So he sent an angel or whoever to talk to David and tell him, hey, this is, you get to pick your punishment from this, from this, or this. And he picks the punishment, and it ends up being a, what is the word that I am looking for? A plague. It ends up being a plague, and it ends up killing 70,000 innocent people. 70,000. Just because David did a census that God apparently told him to do. And apparently the like thing that he did wrong was it wasn't actually God. That's what the apologists say. Bible doesn't say that. It literally says the Lord. So it ends up being 70,000 people who end up dying for David's mistake. And then David's like, why are you killing all of these people? I should be the one that should be punished. And so David does a burnt offering, and then the plague stops. And that's just it. 70,000 lives down the drain for no reason. And then a burnt offering is the one that saved everything. And so that's the story that I look at, and I bring it up to Christians a lot, and they can never argue it because I'm like, how can you defend killing 70,000 innocent people? What did they do? What was their like? What was their crime? What did they have to do with this? They didn't have anything to do with this at all. It sounds like God just wanted to kill 70,000 people.
Well, that's an interesting story, Serafina. But as an atheist, how can you say killing is wrong? How can you? Where is your moral groundwork to say that it's wrong to kill people? And
it's so funny that they think that we don't have any morals.
They're like, I bet they haven't heard this one before, and they haven't thought this through.
Like, okay, you're so.
Oh, you got me. You got me.
You got me. I don't have any morals. I just go around killing folks all the time because why not? I don't have a God to tell me not to. So
right, yeah.
That's literally their reasoning. Is they're like, and I know most of them, if they didn't have God, they would be out here doing the absolute most and most.
Yes, I say that to say, listen, if believing in this, like believing in God and going to church keeps you from like killing and raping and all that, keep your ass in church. Yeah. I recommend that you stay there because you're a danger to society. If not,
like you are unstable without this God. So go ahead, go.
Yeah.
Go right ahead.
I was actually thinking of a different story. I was thinking about David and Bathsheba when I mentioned.
That one too.
Yeah. It happened to David all the time. Apparently, this is
and the thing is that David. Have you ever noticed how a lot of God's favorites are the main ones that were out there sinning and doing crazy
garbage people all across the board?
You're God's favorite, and you're out here doing this, that, and the third. Like, come on now. I'm like, this man, David, who is supposed to be like God's chosen,
a man after God's own heart. Yeah.
Yes. Gets some dude killed because he slept with his wife and wants to hide the fact that she's pregnant.
Wait. He also tried to bring him back.
Yeah.
To raise David's bastard kid. I was like, David, holy shit, man. David put in some work.
Didn't he? See, that story is just so insane to me. Because I'm like, how is it that he did all of this, and it's not David that gets punished, it's not Bathsheba that gets punished, it's the baby.
It's the baby
that God allowed to be born for 7 days. I'm like, what was the point? Like, why was the baby even brought into the world to begin with if you were just kill it in 7 days? For what?
It's just like, hey, yeah, he could have just let Bathsheba not get pregnant. All right.
He could have miscarried. That would have made a lot more sense. Like when like once he got the dude killed or whatever, hell, that would show that God was God more than anything else. He caused a miscarriage in a woman, and she just, as soon as the dude died, and as soon as like he knew what David did, she miscarries and she doesn't even have a baby. Like that story makes so much more sense. He made the baby be born and live, and then
suffer and die. Just get sick immediately and die.
I keep asking Christians with all these stories in the Bible, where's the love? Where's the loving God you're supposed to be talking about? Because I don't think he's over here. I don't think he's in this book. I don't know where he is, but he's not here.
No, not at all. The only love that they're interested in is tough love. It's, hey, I love you, but you know you're living in sin. You're wrong. You know, you're not worshiping the right way. You're not wearing the right clothes. You're fucking the wrong person. Now, don't you get it? I'm saying this because I love you. It's like that's the only type of love that they care about.
I know with everything in me that you truly feel like you're being a help, but you're not. Okay, and in some places, like me, I was the most condescending Christian ever. I was one of those. I was one of those. I'll pray for you, Christians. Like I'm keeping you in my prayers. You know, I see that you're, you know, whatever. Like I used to, me and my friend used to protest outside of Planned Parenthood. I was one of those Christians. Oh my
holy shit.
I was pro-life all the way. I was like, well, if God formed you in the womb, he wouldn't, like, what if you were killed and God formed you in the womb, you wouldn't be here. And all those like tired ass pro-life arguments. I was one of those. I was so deep in it was ridiculous. And so I would make up any possible excuse or anything and just be so condescending and judgmental of just being like, oh, well, I still love you though. Love,
Right? Yeah. I say all of this in love, by the way. I mean this with as much kindness and love as I can possibly muster. So I wanted to ask you this about. So we talked about all this, but people, believe me, we have more. There are an endless supply of the ridiculous shit that you can find. Oh, I want to say real quick that I was trying to think of exceptions to this where the people weren't fuck ups. I think Joseph is one of the rare people that I can't really point to.
Yeah, he didn't really do much.
Yeah, he just had bad shit just kept happening. He was just he was kind of a brat, bragging to all of his brothers about these cool dreams he's having and flexing on his cool clothes in front. But who isn't a brat at 17 years old?
He really did. He didn't really. Yeah, now that I think about it, I'm like, he didn't really do much of anything. And literally everybody else, I'm trying to think of somebody else who's innocent.
It's hard to run across, yeah. But so when did you? I was gonna ask, when did you start? I'll combine the questions then. When did you start making content? You told me this 3 years ago, right? And how did you get into doing it? What was the catalyst that made you start doing it?
Okay, so honestly, it started off as just being for fun. It was just a fun little thing that I did because and it wasn't I wasn't making the videos that I make now. I was doing little trending sounds.
Yeah.
Stuff like that, just cute little. I wasn't expecting anybody to see my TikToks. That wasn't it is. This here was never the plan.
Yeah.
None of this, I would have never thought. And so I just started off doing that. At some point, I started making videos about my mom, and those gained traction. And then around that time is when I started sharing my deconstruction journey, because I had started deconstructing in 2020, and so a year prior before I got onto TikTok. And so I had gotten through my angry phase. And I was now at my point to where I was I feel like sharing, I have a lot of stories to share. And so I just felt like talking them out and, just posting them. I didn't expect anyone to see them. And as time went on, people started seeing them more and they started relating to them. And they were like, I left the church too. This is my experience. You helped me to tell my story, this, that, and the third. It just kept growing. And I would have never been able to tell. And so for me, I just kept making videos because it's genuinely so much fun for me. I have fun making videos and talking about stuff and doing my research on things and all of that. I didn't start truly breaking down the Bible and picking it apart for what I'm known for now. I did not start that. I want to say it was last year at some point.
Wow.
I want to say it was August, July or August. That's when I started to really break it apart, and I started my The Bible Doesn't Make Any Sense series in September. But before then, I was kind of just talking about my experiences and what I knew and what didn't make sense to me and all of that. It wasn't until that point that I started to really dig into it. But truly, it's just been it's been so much fun. And there's the pushbacks of it all. The revenue is never stagnant ever. It is always either you got a bunch of viral videos and you're making a bunch of money, or you're shadow banned and you're not getting anything.
Yeah.
It is a gamble every day. And so there's that. The hate comments are absolutely insane. I never would have thought, as a Christian, I never would have thought there was that many hateful people in that religion. When I was there, I always thought everyone was so loving and so sweet and so forgiving. And then once you start saying what they want to hear, all of a sudden you're a demon. All of a sudden you're going to hell. I have gotten the most awful comments from people, just on TikTok alone, that I had never heard before. And I'm like, wow, y'all are really stuck in this shit so much so that you are making someone who doesn't believe in it feel horrible about themselves. The amount of people who have told me to kill myself, the amount of people who threatened to dox me to find out where I lived and all of that. And I'm like, has it is it that serious? It wasn't that serious for me when I was a Christian. I don't know what's wrong with y'all today. I didn't even really, I said, I didn't know any atheists. I didn't talk to them. I didn't interact with them at all. I was in my own little Christian bubble. And so for me, it's been an insane experience. It's been fun. It's been crazy. Sometimes I want to quit it all, and some days I'm so thankful that I have it. And so it's just every day is a new thing. I literally just posted a video right before we started this this interview, and I'm hoping that it's doing relatively well, but you can never tell when it comes to TikTok, because sometimes your videos might get shadow banned, sometimes they might get shown, and nothing about it is stagnant, which I hate, but I couldn't have picked a better place to start.
Yeah. Second, everything you said about creating on TikTok and everything, because it is wild how I was surprised by how much racism I ran across on TikTok. Not that I didn't recognize that, but I didn't expect TikTok of all platforms to be like full of racists. Like, wow, I thought this was like the young people and the cool shit, but no, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad.
Horrible. It is actually insane. I didn't know that it was that bad either, because before I got on TikTok, I was on like Instagram, Snapchat, stuff like that. I wasn't on like I wasn't on any other apps really. And so when I first like got on TikTok and I realized how it worked with like the algorithm and all of that, and how people you don't know can see your videos, it was a little jarring for me, because I was like, people are going to have a lot of different opinions about this. I knew when I was first posting it, when I started out, I knew there was going to be some people who disagreed with me, but the insanity of it all, just like how hateful and racist and mean and like sexist, and it's really it's something else. When I go through, that's why I barely ever check like my filtered comments. Those are where the worst ones are. I'm like, I try not to check it, but at the same time I try not to let them get to me, because I have so many people in my comments. They're like regularly telling me, they're like, I love your content, I look forward to your videos, I hope you never stop. It's those comments that keep me like, okay, I'm doing this for a reason, and I like it. And so I try not to let the haters bother me.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's weird, like human psychology. I try my best not to read comments, honestly. I try my best not to read them at all, but TikTok kind of forces you to, because once
you have no choice. If you want to check,
boom, there they are.
See them.
Yeah, and you could get 50 positive comments, but then one asshole, like, you motherfucker, and then you can try to ignore it, but it's sometimes I fall to it. I try my best not to.
Because you're like, why would you say that? Like, why? Like to a total stranger.
And it's not as bad to me if they like throw a personal insult at me. That one bothers me, but nowhere near as much as when they say something that's just flatly inaccurate. And it's like, am I gonna let this shit slide? I'm just gonna let this shit slide. Like, I don't want to get, because the person's an idiot, and I'm like, having a conversation is not gonna make it better. I'm not gonna fix however many years of idiocy in a TikTok, argument battle. But sometimes I lose. I lose to it. What I'm fascinated by, I can't believe how many people hate watch content like ours. Like, I don't get it. Like,
I don't either. I've never understood it. I don't interact with content that I don't like.
No, why
would I do that? Why would I mess up my algorithm like that? Like, I feel like a lot of them just genuinely don't know how TikTok works. Like, if they start interacting with content they don't like, they're going to continue to see content they don't like. Like, some of them are like I got this one comment from this lady, and she was an older woman, and she left a comment on my video, and she was like, I don't like this video. How do I not see you anymore? And I was like, there's a block button. You can hit that. She was like, where is that at? And I'm like, eventually she figured it out. I was about to go and block her, and she had already blocked me. And so I went, and so I was like, okay, Grandma figured it out. That's great. So I feel like some of them just genuinely don't know how TikTok works at all, and they're gonna just like it. And then there's the other ones who engage with it because they just want to hate on something.
I don't get that. I don't get it.
I don't get it. They want to put their energy towards hating on someone. And why don't you just interact with like your Christian content and love on that? Like, why do you gotta come bother us? For what? Why are you here?
Well, first I want to say that when the people are like, how do I get this off? I was like, you think this is Google? Like,
right. That's why I'm like, I feel like she was just confused.
Yeah. And second, it's there's something about right wingers in particular. And so like most of my content is not religious related, or it's mostly political. Yeah. And but I have a lot of right wing followers who either the ones that I don't mind are the ones that will comment like, hey, I don't agree with you, but you're making some good points. Like, I got him. This guy's, I got him. Eventually I'll get him over. My goal is not to convert right wingers, but I do like seeing when it happens.
Yeah. And we're gonna swing back to that because
good. Okay, guys. So, but the second type, and far more common, are people who just, you fucking thick-lipped communist. Like, what the fuck are you doing? You are ruining this country. It's like, bro, I didn't come to your page and force you to watch this shit.
No.
I mean, what are you doing here? And this is like this is why, like, when right wingers try to start their own platforms, it doesn't work. Like a Gab or Parler, because then they're just, sucking each other's dicks. Like, oh, isn't this great and everything? They don't want that. They want someone to fight with. And it's like, all right, do it somewhere else. I'm not interested in that. Like, I do the talking here. I talk, you listen. Like, I'm not interested in engaging with your shit. I'm not getting a feed of like Matt Walsh videos on my. I was like, why are you doing it? Yeah, it's weird.
See? I don't even know who that is because I don't. The only reason why I even know about like Christian creators out there is because they talk about me. That's the only reason why I even know that they exist. They will talk about me, and then they will send their little minions to come over to my comment section, and they'll be like, this person responded to you. This person absolutely roasted you. This person this person that. And it's like, I don't care.
Don't give a shit.
Like,
don't give a fuck.
Like, go ahead. Why are you bothering me with
Yep.
They didn't like something that I said, and so they went on their page and decided to make a video about it. Rather than them leaving a comment on my page, at least
right.
Why are you trying to? I feel like the people who do that, they're instigating. They just want to see a fight so
they
bad.
do, yeah.
They're so bored, and it's like, listen. They are free to make their videos and have their opinions about whatever, just like I'm free to make my videos and have my opinions. But it's whenever we start crossing into each other and start trying to tell the other person that they're right. Because here's the thing, none of us know if we're actually right or not. It's literally all of us just saying, I believe this, I believe this, I believe this, I believe this. It's all belief. None of us know any of this stuff for fact. And so for me, I'm kind of just like, there's no point in arguing about it, debating about it. People ask me to debate all the time, and I'm like,
oh, Christ.
No, why would I? For what? There's no one. My page, which is what I was going to spin back around about, my page has not now nor ever been about trying to convert people like to atheism or whatever, or trying to change somebody's mind about something. It's literally just to get people to think, and it's just me showing, hey, I found this cool thing. This thing that I used to believe is this over here, or this works this way, or whatever. And so for me, it's kind of just like, stay over there. Stay in your lane, watch your videos that you like, and stop trying to come over to other people's page that you obviously don't agree with, trying to pick a fight. And it's like, are you that bored? Do you not have anything else to do with your life aside from trying to argue with people who don't share the same beliefs as you? That's why I don't bother Christians. I don't bother them and what they're doing. I talk about my beliefs, and that is it. And I speak from my experience of like being an ex-Christian, things that I used to believe, things that I see now, and all of that. And they see it as a personal attack because it's their religion. And it's like, if you are talking about atheism all day, I don't see that as a personal attack. You're not gonna see me in someone's Christian comment section saying your God's stupid. Like, for what?
Right? Could you imagine in a million years, like scrolling, like some Christian video pops up, and you're like, "You are dead, fuck yours." No, why do I care?
I don't understand why they care. I understand that they feel the need to like convert somebody or whatever.
Yeah.
They're doing like those God loves you, come back to Jesus, that type of shit. I understand that. But when they just come over just to spread hate, you're going to hell, you're wrong, you're inaccurate, you're missing the context, this, that, and the third. And it's like, why are you here? You so obviously do not agree with my content. You don't like what I talk about. Why do you continue to engage with it? Like, for what? Why do you feel the need to spew so much hatred at someone who doesn't believe the same as you? I don't do that. Why do you do that?
I always said that it's the reason people get like so incredibly sensitive when you start talking about their religious beliefs or whatever is that when you question the existence of their God or you insult their God or whatever, you're actually insulting them. Because they kind of give the game away when they call God a personal God. It's like, oh yeah, of course, it's absolutely what he is. Like, yeah, it's so like they've wrapped their identity in this deity. So when you say this is bullshit, they don't see it as an intellectual exercise. They're like, you're bullshit, and so they have that same response, and they feel the need to fight for it. When we're like, what do you care if some random person doesn't believe that? And by the way, it's the analogy doesn't even work in our direction, because back to what you said earlier in the interview, where you talked about how Christians are like a perpetual victims, that they're always saying how persecuted they are.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, Christianity is the most popular belief in the country, still a majority of the population, always has been. Every president we have has at least professed to be a Christian. Half the people you know have names that come straight from the Bible, like Peter, Andrew, James, John, Thomas, Elizabeth, Mary, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel. Like, half the people you know are named after the Bible. Christian holidays are on our federal calendar. And I want to ask you this question right here. Guess how many churches are in the United States? And I'll give you, and so for reference, there are almost 14,000 McDonald's in the United States and 17,000 Starbucks. Just, I hate guessing it, but take a wild guess how many churches there are. Knowing those numbers.
I'm gonna be so for real because I live in Texas and you can't drive nowhere without seeing one. I'm gonna say it's possibly in like the 50 to 100,000. That's what I would say.
That is a very good guess. 400,000 churches in the United States. 400,000 churches in the United States. So I'm sorry, Christians. Like you guys, like people walk around. There's 400,000. You can't look around town without spotting a dozen churches. People have crosses on their shirts, hats tattooed on their fucking bodies, and still they have the balls to say, "Oh, people are coming after Christians. Go fuck yourself." Like,
I don't understand it at all. This is a perfect example for that. I was in the hospital a couple of months ago, and hospital St. Joseph's, named after, And so you go in there, and I guess, and this is just something that I never noticed, because when you're a Christian,
you're blind to the shit. You're
immune. You're kind of just like, oh, it's everywhere. You don't notice how much it's everywhere when you're not a part of it anymore. And so I walk into the hospital and there's a bunch of Bible verses just written all over the walls. I can't go nowhere. I was in the hospital for like 4 days, and every time that I would like walk down to go to the bathroom or something like that, I got to pass by some wall that has a Bible verse on it. They were everywhere in the entire hospital. And I'm like, see, you're allowed to do that. Any other religion would not be allowed to do that. And
national scandal if other religions did that shit. Yeah.
I'm like, you're not. Go fuck yourself. You are not being persecuted at all. I promise you, you are not. You are the majority. There are more of you than there probably ever will be of anybody else combined. So just please understand. If you feel like you are being treated a certain way or discriminated against because of your Christianity, it's probably more your shitty behavior than your religion, more than anything else. You're probably doing something that warrants that type of response, and has absolutely nothing to do with your religion or you being part of it.
It's either that, or you're just so used to your religion getting preferential treatment that when they take it away, you assume you're being persecuted. Like, that's usually what it is. It's
people don't realize their privilege until their privilege gets taken away.
It is, yeah. It's ridiculous. And so that goes to the last question I wanted to ask to wrap this up. What do you have any predictions about how religion, or what religion is gonna like evolve into, or if it'll stay around for the future? Because like we think you mentioned earlier that fewer and fewer people get religious every year. If you look, it's funny looking at the generational track from silent to boomer to Xers to millennial to Gen Z. It is like precipitously falling. But religion, I'm sure you've talked about this before. I don't think I've seen a video, but religion is an important part of human culture, like going back hundreds of thousands of years. And I understand why, because, human beings are not impressive on our own. Like, we're not particularly fast or strong. We don't got claws. We can't fly.
We don't have anything.
Yeah, we are pretty smart. Like, we're great. We're incredibly smart. But one person on their own can't do a whole lot. But you put a bunch of us together, we can literally go to the fucking moon. So working together is our superpower, and nothing brings people together better than religion does. Say what?
I said, I honestly feel like nothing brings people together more than either religion or lack thereof, because there's a lot of people that will have like either your beliefs, or you'll find a group somewhere that has your beliefs and you'll finally feel like that sense of belonging or whatever. But honestly, I feel like people connect simply because of that. I saw, actually, I made a video about that before, talking about how religion kind of connected Black people in the United States whenever Crow was happening and all that. a lot of the meetings would be held in churches. There was a lot of, I mean, like Martin Luther King Jr. He was like an actual, was he a deacon or was he?
He was a Baptist minister. Yeah, he was a preacher.
He was a minister. Yeah, and so it's like we all got brought together with like that and just kind of connected that way, which is why, and this, I don't know if this will sound strange or not, I get excited when I meet a Black atheist or a Black person
same
Christian. I get so excited because I'm like, yes,
fucking unicorn, man.
I love it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it plays a powerful part, and especially for the Black community. Then this is something funny too. Is so we didn't talk too much about politics, which is amazing, honestly. But the Republican Party is the conservative Christian party, and if you know enough Republicans, they think that like they represent Christianity. And I remember talking to someone and mentioning that, well, demographically, the population that goes to church the most in the United States is Black women. Like that is the most church going population by a country mile. No one else is even close. And it's like Black women also vote for Democrats more than anyone else. And I remember her saying, that's kind of weird. I said, well, why is that? She was like, well, because the Republican Party reflects Christian values. Like, okay, did you hear what I said? I guess like the most Christian population disagrees with you. And this is another thing that's funny too when it comes to like Black Protestants and white Protestants. Black like evangelical Protestants vote like 90% Democrat. White evangelical Protestants vote pretty much 90% Republican. And this goes back to like the Holy Spirit thing. So, all right, what's going on here? Like I dare you to point out any like theological differences between Black and white. It's not there. It's the same religion. Same Bible, pray to the same God. They both believe that God plays an important part in society and culture. They act like they're not political. Both sides are. Like Black church and white church are insanely political. Mm-hmm. Why is God giving them two different answers? And you ask this, and they'll be like, they don't want to say, but the answer is like, oh, well, the Black people aren't really talking to God. Yeah. They don't like saying that out loud, but that's what they believe. Now, to be fair, the Black people say the same thing, but God's not talking to either of them. Like God's like that's obviously like, what's happening here.
You're both speaking to air. It's not
exactly. Yeah.
But okay, I guess one of y'all is the right one, I guess, or whatever.
It's like, but like you said, it does bring communities together, and it gives you a sense of purpose. So you said that the lack of belief. I find the lack of belief to not be a really effective unifier because like say I'm an atheist and you're an atheist. Mm-hmm. That doesn't tell me anything else about what you believe. Like all it is that we don't believe in God, but I mean, we could believe anything else. Right. And like, so it has to be during the French Revolution when the French Revolution is really hilarious to study because they were on the right track. They had some good ideas. Execution was kind of poor, where they said, well, listen, we had the Catholic Church and the clergy is corrupt and correct. No argument there. So they said, all right, we're going to abolish. The United States separated church and state. We're going to abolish the church. Whereas like, fuck the church, get them out of here. No religion in this country. But with Robespierre, he realized that, okay, people need something to gather around. We need something to kind of like bond. Where are they going to get married and have funerals and shit? We need something like that. So he started something, which I kid you not, it was called the Cult of the Supreme Being. He actually called it a cult, which is my favorite part, the Cult of the Supreme Being, which was like this universalism, like a woo-woo style religion. He had this goofy ass statue he built. It was laughed out of the country. Like, no, it was like, this is where you just made another church. And so I don't think we found like that's the one vestige that's holding on, because there's not a lot of good solutions that can like glue a community as well as religion. There's a reason it's been around for as long as it is, because it's effective. It's bullshit, but it is effective. So I always ask people like where they think this is going to lead, because I really don't know. I really don't have an answer.
Honestly, I would love to say that I feel at some point more and more people are going to start to wake up, which I do feel like is going to happen. More and more people are going to start to wake up and start to deconstruct. But the problem is a lot of those people found their entire sense of purpose in their religion.
Yes.
So when you deconstruct and your entire purpose, your entire whatever for a living is within that religion, and you leave that religion, there's going to be a lot of people that are like, I guess the best way to describe it is like wandering souls. I guess they don't really know like what to do or what they're doing or what's happening because they don't know what else to do aside from go to church and praise God. And I feel like that's why a lot of them I feel a lot more people have gotten close to deconstruct, or a lot more Christians have gotten close to deconstruction than they would like to admit, that they've gotten to that point of being like, I feel like I don't really understand this. I don't really, believe in this, but what do I have without it? And so I feel like a lot of people are going to start to wake up, but that doesn't necessarily mean that a lot of people are going to start to leave or start to deconstruct or start to actually like think for themselves logically. And so honestly, I don't really have an answer either. I would love to see, a nation that kind of, finds something else to connect on, which currently I would say a decent amount of us have one thing that we all have in common. We all fucking hate the government and we're wishing for like the entire, like the fall of the government altogether. And that's what a lot of people have been like banding together to agree upon. But you're right, religion does bring a lot of people together. It has that sense of togetherness. And so honestly, I would love to see a nation that's a little less Christian based, like not making our laws about it, maybe keeping it in the church and not everywhere. It would if that happened. But I know that's probably not going to happen. I mean, it's literally on our dollar bills. I feel like
I know, right? It's on our money.
it's not like we can escape it. I would love to see a little bit less of it. And see, the thing is that my problem isn't with the religion itself. I will always say this. My problem hasn't been with the religion itself. It's the people who practice it and how they teach it and how they send it out to other people and how they act because of or how they feel they're entitled to act because of their religion. I feel like people more than anything else. The religion itself could have started off as something as simple as we have a God and we love that God and we think that God created us. And a lot of people believe that way. Like I know a lot of people who are like, I'm not Christian, but the religion itself is kind of is like insane. The people who are in it is insane. The church is insane and all of that. But I do believe in like some form of a God. And so there's people who still have that like spirituality kind of feel, but they don't have the connection to the church or the connection to like the religion itself anymore, or the people who are teaching it. And so I don't know. I hope that at some point more people are going to start waking up. At least I hope that we can see that more people start thinking for themselves, because a lot of us just blindly believed whatever we were taught in the churches because our parents blindly believed it and their parents blindly believed it. And it just kept going back because nobody was really asking questions. And now, since we're in an age of, we have access to a lot more things. We have access to, doing our own research on stuff. And so I feel like as time goes on, as we get like deeper and deeper into the digital age that we're in, people are going to start doing their research more. And that's the reason why I make my videos, is just because I want to encourage people to do their own research at some point, because a lot of people kind of just see what they see and they go with that. And so I am hoping that at some point America is going to turn into a lot of people who know how to think for themselves and are figuring things out on their own at some point. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, you're right. It certainly is not a coincidence that the proliferation of information has led to a decrease in religiosity. That is not a coincidence at all. I do have to disagree with you quite strongly, though, on one point in which you said that you think that there are a lot of people who have kind of secretly deconstructed but aren't admitting it because it's such an important part of their life. I don't think that's true. I know it's true. It is 1,000%. Because I don't know about you. Have you gotten messages like this? I've gotten so many messages over the years from people that I went to school with or church with or college with. And there's like, hey, TJ, a lot of what you say makes a lot of sense. And I'm glad you're doing it because it's helped me go through this. But I'm a deacon and I'm married to a believer and we have kids, or I'm a preacher and they can't leave. Like this is their entire life. They are locked into this, and admitting it, not only like and the older you get, the harder it is. Like you're 60 years old, you have to admit to yourself, my entire life has been a lie. That's not going to happen. People are not going to do that. And so, yeah, you're completely correct on that. Deism. That's one last thing you mentioned about how a lot of people are deists. So I was a deist for a while. I didn't tell my deconstruct story, but long story short, I was just studying the formation of the New Testament canon because I wanted to be able to argue how I knew that the Bible was the word of God. And my results were not comforting in any sense at all when I found out how this shit worked. And so I stopped being a Christian around that time, but still I was a look at the trees guy. Oh, come on. This is and why is there something other than nothing? Like something had to have kickstarted this. So I believe that there was something out there, some sort of, divine artificer, a prime mover who got the ball rolling on this. I didn't believe for a second that he had some sort of amusement park for us after we died. He didn't really give a shit about answering prayers. He didn't care about what I wore, who I ate, what I fucked, and in what position. It's like, he didn't care about this at all.
Yeah.
And I was like this for a long time. Until I realized, like, okay, what's the difference between a God that has no interaction with humanity at all and a God that doesn't exist? Turns out there's no difference at all. And I was like, okay, so why am I bothering going with, okay, there must be like, no, maybe there is. I don't know, but I'm not going to pretend that there is one. So yeah, I guess I'm an atheist. I realized I was an atheist more than anything.
Yeah. What people don't realize is that atheism, like everyone starts off an atheist. Like it's some like when you're first born, we all start off that way. It's kind of like the default way of like just being because you don't know anything else or you don't believe in anything else. A lot of people, they kind of just believe that you choose to be an atheist and you choose to stop believing and you choose to do this, and it's like nothing about this is a choice. I can promise you. If anything, it's easy. I'm like, it's easier to be a Christian. I would have pushed my thoughts to the side and continued going to the church and continued being a part of the religion if I hadn't gotten to a point to where I just couldn't ignore it anymore.
Yeah.
People just haven't gotten to that point yet. Because at some point you have to realize, okay, at this point I'm lying to myself.
Yes.
I'm like, I see how this doesn't add up. And I'm understanding how this doesn't add up. I remember so clearly when I was reading through and like whenever my deconstruction started, right before it started, I had that sneaking thought in the back of my head. The more that I started reading, this isn't real. None of this is real. All of this stuff that you've been following, it's just mythology. And I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to accept it for a really long time. I just didn't. I couldn't. I was like, I can't. Like I've literally, when you dedicate your entire life, like you said, this is your whole life. This is your everything. For me, at the very least, at least I wasn't that deep into it to where I was like a pastor or a pastor's wife with kids and stuff, like deep into the religion like that. But I'm like, I dedicated my entire life to this religion. And anytime that I felt like I was slipping away, I felt like it was my fault. And so everything else of like understanding this wasn't real, understanding that you dedicate your entire life to it, you're also like mad at yourself because you're like, I wasted so much time.
Yeah.
So many years. And it's like now all I can do is just move forward with the knowledge that I have. But it's rough.
It is. It's sad, but that's what we're here for. We're here to help people throughout this. I think we are doing okay. People say that we're just whining, complaining. It's more than that. Yeah, we are, but there's a lot more to it. It's really cathartic, not just for us, but for people who aren't vocal about this to help them work their way through it. I think we're doing the Lord's work, if you pardon the pun.
Absolutely.
So, all right. So, Seraphina, tell the good folks where they can find your content.
Yes. So I'm on TikTok at the Devil's Daughter 162. I'm also on Instagram at that same handle, and you will also find me on YouTube at that exact same handle. I'm not really posting that much on Instagram or YouTube as of yet, but I'm starting a podcast soon, which all of my fans have been super, super excited about. And so that will be on YouTube and on my Instagram and on my TikTok as well. And so, yeah, that's where you can find me.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it. I'd love to have you back again sometime.
Absolutely. I had fun. This was great.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
All right.